call the special board meeting of the Ross Valley Sanitary District to order. Will you join me with the allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Should we note that everybody's doing?
Yeah, I was gonna kneel.
No comment. All right, Mary, will you do the roll call first, please?
Gaffney,
Present.
Borstein,
Yes, ma'am.
Kelly,
Here.
Meggs, here, Scylla.
Here.
And I'd like to note that Andrea Clark, counsel, is on the conference phone.
Hi, Andrea.
Morning.
Can I ask you a quick, is the video on?
Yes, sir.
Great, thank you.
All right, I'd like to move on to the approval of the agenda. Does anyone have any comments on the agenda?
Okay, you go.
I move approval.
Thank you.
I second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great, we'll move on to agenda item number 3, board workshop on board policies. Greg and/or Brent.
I will just do a brief kickoff for the workshop, and so welcome everybody, and thanks for making the time on Friday morning. So this workshop is just continuing the efforts that the board has had underway, roughly for the past year or so, to conduct a complete update of what we refer to as the board policies. And for context, this effort came really as a follow-up to a couple of big actions, or a couple of things. One was some very specific recommendations that came out of the State of California independent audit, which the district has made huge gains on in almost every area. And this is just one of those remaining ones that we're chipping away at. It was also recognized somewhat as an offshoot of that the current policies have been around for anywhere from 10 to 15 years. They hadn't really been reviewed in terms of basics like legal compliance or even current practices in some cases, we found out. So those were the basic drivers for why are we undertaking this review and updated policies. So with that overall goal in mind, staff came up with what we kind of refer to as a table of contents. We developed that in consultation with legal counsel and Brent Ives. It was meant to be the overall list of topics we would address. And then the board and staff began making progress on these. So if you turn to the second page of the staff report, this just gives you the very high-level overview and of how we've been approaching these. And as you can see, so far we've completed about 5 policies. These have been developed, reviewed, discussed, and adopted. They are in place now, which is great. So those are the ones at the top. The ones in the middle, the workshop topics, those are the focus of today's workshop. And there's a third category, which are ones that you will be seeing in the future. We considered them somewhat more prescriptive and or ones that we felt we could get close and bring a fairly complete draft to the board in the future. So the fact that today's focus is on that middle list should not be taken to mean that you won't get opportunity to provide input and further consideration of all of these. You will. And that's one thing I want to emphasize at the outset. We're here, Brent Ives, myself, Andrea, and Mary, we're really here to facilitate and help, but these are your policies of the board. They're meant to be of benefit and value to you guys and to future boards in how you carry out some of the basic, business as a board. So we're here to help. This is your discussion. These are your policies. Let us know what we can do to kind of facilitate that. But again, don't feel like this is your only bite at the apple. We're here to take our cue from you. If this workshop's useful and there's other topics you want to continue in this format, we certainly can do that. Okay, that's really about it. I'm going to hand this off to Brent, who we brought on to assist in this whole endeavor. And we've got Andrea on speakerphone. And with that, Mary, I'll hand it back to the board.
Thank you, Greg. Brent, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Andre, I hope you can hear fine.
Yes, so far so good.
Good, wonderful. Thank you for allowing me to work with you on this. I think it's a really best practice move. I think it's not only in response to maybe somebody that said, hey, this is a good idea to do in your audit, but as you recall, a couple of years ago, we did a workshop where I mentioned that the best boards, the best districts that I work with, spend time with policy. And this is where you do the hard work, the professional level board work, that it's, that documents your time and effort to try to rise above it and look. And it's just one of the best practices out there. It occurred to me that Doug doesn't know much about my background. Potentially, I've been doing this kind of work directly with special districts and cities in the state for about 15 years. I had a career, and this is my second career. I worked at a place called the Lawrence No. 1 National Laboratory for years, and
We need to talk about that.
during my transition out of Lawrence Livermore and into private life, I ran for city council, served on the city council for 14 years, and then 8 more years as mayor of the city of Tracy, which you know if you've gone to Yosemite a few times. And so I started applying some of the things I had learned at Lawrence Livermore in terms of planning, strategic planning, and just good ways of facilitating decisions to the council, and found there were some gaps and worked those gaps. And after I started working on those, I said, gee, I think this might be something other people need. And so here we find ourselves today. I've been doing it for about 15 years now. Right now I'm involved in 3 other districts that are doing the same kind of thing. Not just sanitary districts, mosquito vector control districts, one close to you, other districts up and down the state, because this is a really important thing. This is what boards should do. This is why we get elected to office. It's really to make policy. We're policymakers. And so if we take the time to consider things like this, it not only helps us as a board, but it helps future boards. It gives the public the confidence that we've got things not just thought about and kind of filed somewhere. We have a manual, a book of policies, and we are committing ourselves to following those. And this work is good, and at the end of it, we may have a nice document set that in 3 weeks or a month you may adopt them, and you'll go on and adopt the rest, and you'll create the book. But if you don't use the book, if you don't make it a focal point of really how you do business, then it's really, in some respects, wasted effort. And so I think it's really important that you're doing this. Equally important that you find a way to integrate this into the way you do business. Now, that comes back to who's really responsible for policy. Well, we're all responsible for policy. You're going to make policy that staff stays within. This policy creates boundaries that people have considered and they stay within as a board. But the board chair takes on a big responsibility for implementing and seeing to it and bringing this back to policy. So if you wanted to write a board chair description, one of the things would be along with your district manager and your attorney, I distinctly remember it was a rules of order policy. How do you do your business, city council? And we were marching right along and doing our business, and it was kind of culturally acceptable for years to do it a certain way. And we claimed somewhere way back when that we had adopted Robert's Rules of Order. Okay, and we were, like I said, we were marching pretty swiftly and everything was going well. Until somebody got up to one of our meetings and said, Mr. Mayor, you claim in policy number blah, 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 that I've never seen before, you claim that you follow Robert's Rules of Order. And already I'm starting to feel. And I said, okay. And I'm starting to glance at the manager, because this is what happens when we get caught saying something we have no intention on doing. So that's the other thing about board policies. If we're going to say them, let's do them. So he went on and he said, here's a place where you're out of order, not following your own rules. And fortunately, he wasn't acrimonious. He was just trying to be a good citizen. Because honestly, he could have caused a great deal of upset. So he asked me the specific question. I said, Mr. Manager, what about that? And the manager quickly said, look at the attorney, and he looked quickly at the attorney and said, Mr. Attorney, what about that? And so we learned a lesson that night, and that if we're going to say we adopt and we adhere to Robert's Rules of Order, then we better know what we're adhering to. What are Robert's rules? Do we know it? Who's responsible? Who does what when? How does it get kept? And it's this chain of collective responsibility that's really important to those, and doesn't get us in that situation. Not that the Ross Valley Sanitary District will ever be in that situation again, but you know what it's like to have the Klieg light on you, the spotlight, so to speak, and not, like I said, you don't ever necessarily want to go there again, only for the ribbon cuttings, but if it ever does, what you need at that point, most of all, is coverage. Is some linkage back to, wait a minute, we've considered that, we've practiced that, and we feel comfortable that we've done that right. That's what policies are all about. So, very good that we're here today. Some of these, I think, are going to be pretty straightforward. Some are going to certainly need some answers, but realize you can keep, toss, add, delete. You all, a majority of you, can do pretty much whatever you like with these policies. The ones that we're going to look at today, these 7, board norms and values, working with the district staff and consultants, placing items on the agenda, your professional development, training, and education, associations and memberships, appointment to the JPA commission, and then board compensation. Those are the ones we're going to discuss specifically today. In the future, you're going to look at those that are drafting and what are considered at this point to be routine items. I can tell you, in working with other districts, that 2 or 3 of those can be problematic, even down in there. Problematic only in the worst case. See, you're always kind of protected against the worst case. Problematic in the worst case, they just create a new project for the district. See, every time we get wrapped around a poor performance as a district team, it just diminishes the effectiveness of the overall agency. And so what you want to do is have clear policy that avoids that kind of thing. So it's really important that we stay on top of those as well as you start looking into those. Let's see. So remember, you're not just making policy for yourself, but you're making policy for future boards as well. And for those that are on the outside looking in and saying, is Ross Valley Sanitary District really serious about these great changes that are occurring, and how long are they to last? And this is really the lasting testimony of a great board, a good policy making. So I hope you've had a time to review these and look them over. We're going to certainly do that, and we're going to start with board norms and values. Now, I believe that you have seen something like this before. I know in our workshop, I said, here's a generic set of norms and values, and you looked at it, it was kind of getting later in the day, and I recall saying, yeah, oh, that looks nice, and then we went on. This is, so we teed this one up early for you to look at. There are 8 different bullets here that basically outline the kinds of things you could commit to. Now, there's no hammer in board norms and values. There's nothing at the end of someone who completely violates one of these. There's no real hammer there that says, okay, then we're going to do this or that. There are some actions that can take place if you were to want to or need to go there, but they're not in your policy anywhere to do things like censure, to do things like taking away committee assignments, to do things like, I've even seen districts do removal from public meetings. They move the board member to another room with a phone. Yeah, it goes all over the map on that. But this set is your kind of starter set in terms of your own self-described values. And so I'll just read the purpose. The purpose is of the norms and values are in place to ensure that the board presents the ratepayers of the Ross Valley Sanitary District with proper and effective governance practices while working with the public, each other, and district staff. As such, the following norms and values guide this and future boards. So you can understand the intention of this policy is that you intend as a board on working together. It really is. That's the overarching objective of this policy. We're gonna have a basis of trust. We're going to work together and give people the benefit of the doubt. We're going to commit to trying to be collegial, at least at some level on the board. So let's just read through them. There's only 8 of them. Respect the dignity, style, values, and opinions of each director shall be respected. So there's some wording issue there. So it should just start with the. Dignity, style, values, and opinions of each director shall be respected. Shall is a tough word. Respect is an interesting word.
How about just leaving the last 3 words off?
Shall be respected.
No, you have to leave those off.
Just making it a value.
Respect the dignity, style, values, and opinions
Oh,
of each
you
director.
leave the first respected and take out the, yeah.
Because the rest of the bullet points have like a verb at the beginning.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, but do we need to talk about that?
Sure.
What does that really mean? Let me give you just a little bit of kind of the governance position. All of you were put in this office in the same way. Maybe there were some appointments. I don't think so. All of you were elected by the same public.
In competitive races.
Right. And so in the greater picture of things, there are 5 chairs there that are occupied by 5 people. Take your cell, your personalities out of it. And the mutual respect that's shown up here sets an tone for the mutual respect of the public, because it's the public that puts you in the office. The professional level of performance is demonstrated by how much you respect staff and how you treat staff and the public as they show up. And so those 2 things are kind of at play here in this set, trying to get at what the right words are for you and you feel good about. But style, everybody's got different style. They come prepackaged with a style. Values and opinions. And so if I respect, Mike, I'm going to use you. If I respect Michael's, obtuse opinion on something, I'm at least opening my mind to saying, I'm going to be open to this. I'm not going to dismiss it because Michael always comes up with obtuse opinions. I'm just using you as an example, Michael, because I know you won't. But it's really not the prepackaged set. It's not easy. This is not easy. This is one of the hardest parts of the job, because over time as we work together, we get information about each other. And we assess and we have experience with each other. And so it's hard to stay neutral. And look, we're talking about the ideals. We're talking about the theoretical, the best case. Come on, look, here's what the public would like to think that we're doing here with this district, is that we rise above any kind of petty differences. And as such, we're going to respect the dignity, style, values, and opinions of each other. Thoughts?
I think that's basic. When you're, as you mentioned, and it's appropriate, you're respecting the voters. So.
Yeah, you made this point very, very clearly when we did a strategic planning workshop. Was that what it was?
It was the you did your strategic plan here, but we did a kind of warm up with you, a vision, vision.
And just a little background for you, I did a very similar deal on the San Antonio Town Council. We went through very much similar policies and procedures while I was on, so.
And it's an excellent thing to do. It's always a best practice. Second bullet is practice responsiveness and attentive listening. Wow, it's so easy to broadcast inattentive listening. I sat next to a council member for 4 years that did nothing but pay her, balance her checkbook and write out greeting cards for 4 years. Just It's working
Well, it
fine.
could have been knitting, you know.
Not part of
Knitting's
Could
okay.
have been knitting.
Knitting, I don't know, knitting, but the problem was, you know, actually, she's a brilliant woman. When she needed to engage, all of a sudden she was. But the perception, the view of the public was that she's not paying any attention.
Right.
And so it didn't seem, or the perception wasn't attentive listening, it was just, she was. So I have to admit, there's quite when it happened, it was there.
When I first got elected, we had an attorney who texted,
We had what?
an attorney who texted
Texting.
the entire.
Texting. Yeah. That's one
So
of
her
those.
head was always down. Yeah, so
Yeah.
that was weird.
Huh?
You know, I'm not sure if it should be here or not, but, you know, I think it's really key for board norms and values to carefully read the agenda. Would we put that here? It's not a respect thing. Well, it's respect the staff.
You know, it seems a little disrespectful of the board decision team when somebody comes in and opens up their agenda packet before the meeting
For the
starts.
first time.
For the first time.
Oh, crap.
Yeah, you see what I mean? And so it's a little disrespectful because what it implies is that I'm gonna take your time, all of your time tonight in preparing myself to make these decisions. And I'll read the staff report now. So if you think something in there, if you all think something in there
I
about.
think the respect is that you know, prepare for, you know, read agendas and be prepared for meetings.
How about responsive, practice responsive and attentive listening and preparation?
Well, can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
What I wrote is, because I think Tom makes a great point, but it might be a different bullet point.
Okay.
In other words, we read the material. But this, practice responsive and attentive listening to the public, staff, and other directors. Because I understand what Pam said about the texting. On occasion, by the way, I wanted to know, we either follow Robert's rules or we follow something else. So for example, I just confirmed, because I know in Sansoma we didn't, and so I sent a text, it's Rosenberg's that we follow.
Rosenberg,
So we can follow whatever we follow, I'd kind of like to know which we do. But if you're texting the whole time, you're not looking at the public, and yes, you have a bad, they think, where you may be really paying attention, but it is a bad, it doesn't look good.
Right? So what you're saying is to whom, and that would be to each other, to the public, and to staff.
Right.
Yeah? And then we won't lose the bullet of preparation.
No, I'd add that, yeah. And I'm sorry, can I ask, what does this board follow, Roberts or Rosenberg?
Rosenberg.
Okay.
Which, as I recall, are very simple. I mean, but I remember asking when I first got on the board for Jolie to send them to me, and it was kind of like,
They're 10.
be nice.
Yeah.
In a minute.
Just Ms. Andrea, I don't want to interrupt, but on Rosenberg's rules, it was probably about a year ago or so that I had sent out a link to those rules to the entire board. I'd be happy to do that again. They're not that different from
You can always Google.
Okay.
Very good. Okay. Identify and respect the needs of the district's constituents as a main priority. That's one of your values. One of your norms. Commit to emphasizing the positive, avoiding double talk, hidden agendas, gossip, backbiting, and other negative forms of interaction.
Does double talk mean that something we say means two different things, or talking at the same time as another director?
No, I think it's two meanings, but
Okay.
honestly, I think commit to positive forms of interaction is the root of this.
Right.
Defining all of the negatives is a long list of ways to offend each other, or ways to offend the process, or ways to be negative about things that are moving forward. And it's not, I don't know that the list is absolutely necessary. Up to you all.
Right. Honestly, I'd rather keep this bullet point positive by avoiding the list of negatives. Commit to, is it positive forms of interaction?
Or
Is
just,
that-
yeah, emphasize the positive. Commit to emphasizing the positive. Just the first 5 words.
An interaction.
Did you put this together?
You know, I think it's a combination of some of the old that you had, and then we looked it over and we said, well, let's talk about it with the board. It's not unlike a lot of others that have these.
No, it's got specifics.
Well, right, this one has it said.
Are we gonna adopt this as a policy? It'll be like policy number something?
Yeah, that's the intent.
Correct.
Not today, but we'll as it comes back to you. So how would you like to deal with that bullet point?
Commit to emphasizing positive forms of interaction.
Yeah, or positive forms of positivity and communication.
And communication or something like that.
Can I ask why? Why would you have?
Well, what's positive is, yeah, sure. Why? Yeah.
Why do you want to take out specifics?
I guess I just didn't think they were necessary, and that also acts as if we have a history of, it read to me like, oh, these are things that have gone on before, and maybe somebody will want to pull this out and say, hey, wait a minute, remember we said we didn't want hidden agendas, we didn't want gossip or backbiting, and honestly, to me, that just sort of sets it limits when we could have just a broader statement of positivity, but not tied to it.
There are a couple of means of communication. There's one that's kind of in front and there's one that's kind of behind. Gossip and backbiting are usually behind the door. The others can be in front of the door. You see what I'm getting at? But, you know, it's an overall value of the board to try to emphasize a positive. That doesn't mean you all agree. See, the real test of a board of 5 people or 35 people making a decision is to be able to functionally disagree. Is to be able to allow for, it's kind of that first one, the dignity and stuff, value of opinions of others. Okay, but along with the commitment to work together on things, you've got to also put up with one another's ways of looking at things, and those of you that are on perhaps the negative side of it, meaning the other side of the vote at times, or maybe even at many times, need to respect the process. So if the process needs to be respectable, meaning that you always use the same process to get to a decision, it's respect everyone's opinion, but then there's a vote. And so whether you're on the positive side of that vote or on the other side of that vote, you've got to respect that process. In doing so, it allows you to go on to the next vote without any cumulative effect, at least in theory. It's tough. It's tough. It really is. And so the things said while you're storming, while you're in discourse, in debate, the things said, the nonverbals that are projected are what can be just as easily be difficult for the process, because then the process has personality.
You mean the underlying feeling continues?
An eye roll can mean volumes, right?
So I guess for me on this, is when 2 board members start whispering to each other while somebody's talking, I guess, and I suppose, I don't know what to say
I
about
can't
it.
hear.
Is that just in Rosenberg's rules, and then it's up to the chair to point that out, or I guess would that show up in this particular one?
I think this would be a place you've referenced the fact that to you personally, or to somebody else, that doesn't seem proper, or it doesn't, it could be viewed, perceived as non-positive, because
I just want to make sure, Tom, you said you couldn't hear Pam. You wanted to- Would you say it again, Pam?
I said, I was wondering, so we look at this, and when a board member's talking and two other board members start whispering to each other, it's kind of like high school, you know, the kids in the back. And you can hear this whispering, and the chair doesn't acknowledge it sometimes, or I don't notice that the chair acknowledges it. So all of a sudden, I don't feel like I'm here. I feel like, should I just stop and wait, or? So I just wanted to make sure that would that be addressed in this emphasizing positive, or should it just go back to Rosenberg's rules? So it sounds like
it's kind of both of them
Yeah,
put
okay.
together, isn't it? And I think,
Well, there's times when somebody's talking and two board members may clarify something. If it's an ongoing thing, it could be an issue. Sometimes you could say, I'm sorry, what agenda item are we on? 7. Great. You know, it doesn't always have to be something, you know, sinister. It sometimes is just basic, but it depends on how long the whispering is going on for
I agree.
and how often.
it
You know,
should
you and I
be.
whisper together on occasion, and I think I've done the same thing, you know, and I've only been to a couple of meetings.
It's best not to do a lot of that,
Right.
but it could be, and it could be that they're saying, it could be. See, and that's that's the difficulty with whispering, is that it could be that, oh no, here we go again. See, all are on the table for the person who doesn't hear the whisper. That's why you all need to work it out. To offer the public the best level of service, you need to be able to be sensitive to one another's perceptions, whether it's an eye roll or a whisper. And so, is it specifically called out? No, but are you kind of committing to a higher level of performance? Yeah.
Everything goes back to number 1.
It-
If there's any problem with any of these bullet points past number 1, it should just say comma, if not, see number 1. Respect the dignity, style, values, and opinions of each director. If you're not doing the respect, then none of it. All the other ones fall into place.
So what we landed on was commit to emphasizing emphasizing positive forms of communication. And whispering probably isn't the most positive form. In fact, the public can see that as the beginning of a cabal, of lining votes up. So it's whispering up there is a difficult thing, and it can lead to the negative, just probably more often than it leads to the positive. Oh, they're just up there whispering about how they're developing their decision filters. Nah, I doubt it. What are they whispering about? That's what we should encourage, right? And the same is true of each other. And so that's what the discussion of board norms and values does, is it kind of brings this out of us. The next one is commit to focusing on issues, not personality. Now, this one may be there for cause. It may be there as a reaction for cause. As a reaction to the past when, man, we would call people out. Not because of their position on an issue, but just because, I don't know. And that's kind of what this is aiming at. And only you can answer whether or not this is still necessary. It'd be nice not for it to be necessary. But there's a couple in here that say personalities. But number 1 says value them all, respect them all. Not just value them, but that respect is a big word up there. The first word in your values and norms is respect. Maybe that's the only word that's necessary in your norms and values. You see what I'm getting at?
Yeah, I think it's necessary.
It's not easy.
Yeah.
And only you in your heart of hearts know if you respect one another. That's the interesting difficulty about this kind of thing. Because as we go through, look, this is an arranged marriage. You guys are kind of stuck with each other. And the public Those thousands of people that you serve are depending on you to kind of work it out. Your kids, so to speak, they're arranged to marriage, right? Okay, enough of the metaphor. But in some respects, when you become an elected official, yes, you are one of a few in the whole community. I mean, you can count less than 100 in the whole area, probably. And people need to be able to expect out of this board and every other council and board of supervisors and so forth, they need to be able to expect things that, and they do expect things that they too oftentimes don't get. And that's where things come kind of unglued. You're committing, by virtue of doing this today and what you're doing, to doing it at this level, at the professional level, what I call the professional level board work. Good for you. But that means you've got to kind of turn the Etch-a-Sketch over and shake it. And this one kind of looks like there's still some remnant there. Tell me about it. What do you think about this one?
I think focusing on issues and personalities may be in the eye of the beholder.
Eyes of the beholder.
Yeah, meaning that, you know, I think historically probably people have thought, oh, I'm just focusing on issues, and then other people have thought, no, you're choosing your side based on who is choosing that side also. So that's, I mean, I think objectively it's the truth, you know, it should be true. But I guess I bristle at it a little bit because I do think that there's a legacy of, you know, you're voting that way because those other people are voting that way, which undermines the sense that we're all objective and we all can all look at issues and come to a decision, and it may be that we have differences of opinion, but that, you know, it does revert back to, are all of our opinions valued, or, and the next bullet point gets at that even more, clicks and voting blocks based on personalities.
I was going to suggest these 2 points be eliminated, because the next one answers it. I understand the differing viewpoints are healthy in the decision-making process. Individuals have the right to disagree with ideas and opinions without being disagreeable, and it's fine.
Right, I agree with that.
Yeah. So can you all say that bullets 5 and 6, they're not numbered, but it's 5th and 6th bullet would go away, and that you would, by virtue of, by your group today, would inherit a number 7, which really covers it.
That's it. I'd also point out that whether we state it or not, voting blocks violate the Brown Act.
Yeah. Voting blocks of a majority certainly violate the Brown Act.
I like the first sentence of 6.
Be open to the presentation of opinions of others.
We can leave that in as the first sentence of 7.
The second one.
Sure. Okay.
Get rid of 5.
I'll read it to you when we're... So be open to the presentation of the opinions of others. Understand that differing viewpoints are healthy in the decision-making process. Individuals have a right to disagree with ideas and opinions, but without being disagreeable. So, without getting personal. That's the hump that you don't want to go over. It's when you go over the personal, disrespectful, insulting, pervasive ways of communicating against individuals or even groups within you, then you get to a place where it's very hard to ever get back to the other side, where you can kind of just let governance play, and always putting the mission and the people as number 1. Because there's always this remnant that can be there. So what you want to do is, even if there is any kind of a remnant, you should begin erasing that.
Excuse me, I'm just
Sure.
wishing. I'm part of the public. Should I sit back
Oh,
there?
absolutely. Yes. Okay, so.
There's food.
And there's food. So, as read, then, the new 5th bullet would be open to the presentation and opinions of others, and then it would be added to that. Understand that differing viewpoints are healthy. You like those statements, is that right? And then the last one would be commit to being supportive of an action once the board as a body has voted on it. That's it.
I think that's
Oh, wait a minute.
a good one for discussion.
Yeah, someone's gotta be a devil's advocate.
That doesn't mean you, well, let me
Yeah,
explain
that's
what I
All
say
right,
about
you
that.
do your thing and I'll do mine.
Yeah, you can disagree with an action, but if the board's voted on it, it's in the best interest of the public to get it done as best as it can. And therefore, if you, I'm not saying you will, of course, sabotage it, either actively or by inactively, there are ways to sabotage that, and that's not serving the public. You can always say I disagree with the policy, but it is the policy. So, for example, if I say every single meeting, we really need to be Robert's rules, not Rosenberg's. I mean, at some point, who am I serving but myself? The board voted, the board passed, it is what it is. Being a dissenter is fine, being a saboteur is not. And so, not that I'm saying anybody's a saboteur, I'm just trying to make the distinction.
Okay, so I believe in Robert's, Rosenberg's rules, maybe, if the vote, there is a way that you can bring a vote back. Andrea, are you there?
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, if there's some rule, and this is more of a literal comment, you can bring back the vote. If you have to have another board member, I think, to support you, and you have to do it within a certain amount of time. Do you know what I'm referring to?
Yeah, a vote to reconsider.
Yeah, so that's primarily where I'm coming from. And yes, you have to support it even though you voted no against it. And that's the part of the process. That's the democratic way. But can you just explain that so people understand that, yeah, it's a little difficult. And I don't know if you know about this. It's a little weird. Can you just briefly explain that there is a process to bring a vote back to reconsider?
This is not that, you want me to read it?
Sure.
There is a special and unique motion that requires a bit of explanation all by itself, the motion to reconsider. A tenet of parliamentary procedure is finality. After vigorous discussion, debate, and a vote, there must be some closure to the issue. And so, after a vote is taken, the matter is deemed closed, subject only to reopening it in a proper motion to consider, if a proper motion to consider is made and passed. A motion to reconsider requires a majority vote to pass, like any other garden variety motions. But there are two special rules that apply only to the motion to reconsider. First is the matter of timing. A motion to reconsider must be made at the meeting where the item was first voted upon. A motion to reconsider made at a later time is untimely. The body, however, can always vote to suspend the rules and by a 2/3 majority allow the motion to reconsider to be made at another time.
By 2/3 majority.
Yep. Second, a motion to reconsider may be made only by certain members of the body. Accordingly, a motion to reconsider may be made only by a member who voted in the majority on the original motion. If such a member has a change of heart, he or she may make the motion to reconsider, or any other member of the body, including a member who voted in the minority on the original motion, may second the motion. If a member who voted in the minority seeks to make the motion to reconsider, it must be ruled out of order. The purpose of the rule is finality. If a member of the minority could make a motion to reconsider, then the item could be brought back to the body again and again, which would defeat the purpose of finality. If the motion to reconsider passes, then the original matter is brought back before the body, and a new original motion is in order. The matter may be discussed and debated as if it was the first time.
Very good. See?
Sorry, but this happened here once or twice.
Yeah, that's happened a lot.
With the first board I was
Not
on.
here, all of them.
And what happened was, if you did not know these rules, and that's why I'm saying, we really need to know these rules. In one instance, it worked. The other, it failed, and because the time ran out. Somebody wanted to bring it back, and the time ran out. So
There's other pages.
I know this probably doesn't necessarily fit into this,
You know, but I think it does. I think the discussion is good. Part of the value of doing these is the discussion, the teachable moment, the time when we all kind of come to closure or some understanding of what some of the issues are. Here's what I think this one means. If due process has taken its course and the board has taken action, then we, with no hammer attached, are committing to not going aside and taking shots at that action. Saying, well, I know we voted to buy those valves from that company, but I didn't vote for it. And I'm going to write a letter to the editor and let them know that I didn't vote for it.
Yeah.
The value of that really is that it makes me look different, and it says I don't trust my colleagues or the process that they use to procure the valves, and I don't like it because I just don't like it. See, it's too much about me and not about us, and quite frankly, them. This gets back to respecting the process. If the process is fair, considerate, open, logical, and it's consistent, the process for making decisions, everybody's opinion respected, everyone gets a chance at polishing the rock, then you stand a better chance of someone not saying later, well, I didn't vote for that. Instead, they'll say, well, look, I had my day, I did my best, I even tried to get it reconsidered, but it didn't go.
Okay, so after the ball really drops, you're saying move on, okay.
And I'd also make, if I could, there was one, it's been on YouTube, there was one town council where the mayor, who thought he was the king, really did, kept bringing motion back over and over and over again. Do you remember that?
I think I've seen that, yeah.
And the other board members had to leave the room in order to deny him quorum, in order to end the meeting. And that's on YouTube because he made a fool of himself, the town, the community, and he kept bringing it back, and it's like,
He just couldn't let it go.
yeah.
And so he didn't value the process nor again, remember that there's no strata among you, you're all ride in the same way, you
Elected at large
all
from the same
elected at large,
population.
yeah, the same population, and so you need to respect one another, almost regardless of the vote, but you need to agree on a process that, again, gets back to all those attributes that I described, that allows everyone to have their shot, everyone to have to apply their opinion. And then the process is the process, the vote is the vote. There's even a process to try a revote. If that doesn't work, then your remedies are exhausted, and you move on. And you say, I trust the collective decision based on the process that was applied to it. Not easy, because that wasn't where I was at, but that's where our district is at, and I'm going with it. That's what this is kind of implying. And again, in governance theory, that would be the best position. Again, finding a way to functionally disagree and move on unencumbered to agenda item number 5, which makes you make another decision together, and the hundreds of decisions you're going to be making together in the future.
Well, and the other thing that I think the reason this is important is because we have a vibrant discussion on most of our agenda items, and there's an opportunity to, try to argue your side and make a point and bring other people along. And then at a certain point, the vote is the vote. So if you believe in that opportunity to, convince another board member to change position, then you have to, at a certain point, say, okay, we've all done our best and move on. And we don't have a history of that. We actually have a history of dramatic holding of, that was a 3-2 vote, statements of that again and again and again at later meetings. So I think this is really important.
Yeah, I've seen boards say, well, we've got the votes, so that doesn't matter. Okay, technically, you can move the item. But in terms of process reflect your commitment to good governance? And let me tell you, if you all know that you're all going to get an equal shot, and I use this analogy of polishing the rock, I have no idea why, but the rock is every decision, and you each get a shot at it, and you each work it from a kind of a rough cut thing to something of beauty, of public policy, right? And if you all get the same shot, then you all must prepare the best way you can to make your case. So really, the attributes of the decision maker that's going to move their agenda, move their idea, move their initiative forward are going to be preparation, presentation, credibility. All those things need to be packaged so at the moment when you're able to polish your rock, you say, look at that, I've made the case to such a high degree that others agree with me.
Right.
That's not easy, because sometimes you're just going to be up on the other side. And when you are, you just say, I've done my best, I've prepared as best I can, I've participated in the process, now there's a vote, and there's a process to move on. And so due process has taken place. So, commit to being supportive of an action once the board as a body has voted on it. Is that okay?
I think it's good.
I think there's a caveat to that, which is, and this is a challenging one, because I agree with what you just said. I made a point that you need to work to make sure you have the best outcome, which means it doesn't mean as an individual you have to agree with it, and there is that, you know, everybody, you didn't lose your civil rights when you walked in the door or when you took your oath of office, but there's a difference between, you know, for example, if somebody from the IJ called me on an issue, I might say, yeah, I didn't really, no, I feel like I should be able to say that. I don't know where media policy is, I'm going to come up with.
The policy doesn't say you can't.
Yeah.
What the policy says is that you should, maybe what it should be is, maybe what I even said is the process to an action. Because there's no getting around the fact that you might still feel that buying those valves from that particular company or those particular kind of valves was wrong, or that procurement action was wrong. I'm just using that as the analogy right now. But when the IJ calls you, you say, look, I know we practice fair policies. I know the fair policy. I respect the majority of board decision, even though I myself voted against it.
Yeah, and
There's, I mean, the votes are
in a way, it's almost, I failed to convince my fellow board members to agree with me, so how good am I?
We all have our own personal responsibility. If we feel strongly about a matter, then we're carrying that ball. And so what we do with that.
Well, I always look at each board member reflects a section of the community.
Yeah, sure.
Our values, beliefs, whatever. So,
Yeah.
what it is, it's how we get voted in. There's
Yeah.
sections of the public that vote for me, there's sections of the public that vote for me, whatever. So I try and use that.
I agree, but when the town decides that we're going to build Sir Francis Drake through Ross, and all the towns had a vote, and it passed 80-20, it's really not right to lay in front of the bulldozer. You know, the town voted, it's a democracy, you lost. And so, but there's also a way of saying, I just think this is crazy, we're gonna have floods in the future. I mean, you know,
It doesn't stop.
It's a nuance.
I still don't know that it's in my mind, and look, all of us have the right to represent our own mind. I mean, there's nothing that can stop us from that. And again, I preface that with there's no hammer over these things. These are just what we generally commit to as a board.
I like what you said about putting the word process in there.
How does everyone else feel about that?
Because
Commit to
the
being
word process is not anywhere in this, and you have kind of hammered it. So somewhere, maybe at the beginning, a respectful process, I don't know, just,
Well,
I
I guess
really
what-
like the process.
Commit to being supportive of the process for action once the board as a body has voted on it.
I'm fine with
we hammered on that one a little bit.
Okay.
Can I wordsmith it?
Yes, you may.
Commit to being supportive of the process of a board action.
The process.
Or maybe it's a,
Well, that doesn't,
almost like a dash or a parenthetical, commit to being supportive of an action, and then dash, and the process by which, you know,
Of the process of a board action.
by which it was arrived.
I like that, I think that's good.
good.
That's two birds.
It's not, I'm not sure it's grammatically correct, but you understand the.
Work on that.
Andrea, a question, we have one member of the public in the room. At what point or how should we ask him for input in this sort of? Oh, he's shaking his head, okay.
Just a witness.
Okay,
Learning.
but, you want to give me some advice anyway?
Yeah, I mean, this is a workshop, and so there's not a specific, as far as I'm concerned, there's not, specific actions the board is taking, it's just discussion. So the board has discretion as to whether to involve the member or members of the public throughout the discussion, or to pick a time before you move on to the next one to ask for any contributions from the member of the
Well,
public.
we'll just ask him if he wants to say something, or raise his hand, and
Yeah.
we'll talk whenever he wants.
Please let us know if there's any point you want to give us input. Thank you very much.
Okay. Very good.
All right,
Hammer
number-
through those.
number one.
I think you had some good discussion on that. So let's look at the second one, which is working with staff and consultants. And there's a little note up here, policy related to communication between board members and staff. It does not apply to how board members communicate with the public and the media, etc. And there are three parts to it. Let me read the purpose. This policy establishes guidelines for board member communications with general manager, district staff, and consultants. And let me just preface this by saying, and you all know I'm a consultant for special districts. I work with special district issues all the time. People call me for some developmental things like board process and board procedures and also strategic planning, but many times they call me for cause. There's something going on, there's some problem. And I tell you, many times, the root cause of a lot of the problems is this unfortunate, at times unintended issue of board members going around the general manager and talking to staff members inappropriately. Talking to staff members is not illegal. There's nothing wrong with talking to staff. They're people, you're people, you can talk. Some of you know them, you know their kids, that's one thing. Is when it shifts over to a business discussion that it becomes inappropriate. And part of the reason it's inappropriate is your chain of command as a board stops there. You don't have any chain of command for those that work underneath the general manager. And you've seen this before, where there is this hourglass-shaped organizational structure. Andrea, I'm drawing in board, sorry. And you are here, the representatives, and Greg is here, the executive, and they are here, the org chart, and your line of command, you have a contract with this individual. And you probably have a contract with the attorney firm, and you have some other contracts that go out over here. But in this line, you have expectations for him relative to optimizing this asset as it's applied to the mission. This is just one of the assets. There's money, there's facilities, and there's equipment as well. There's 4 assets that the public is saying, here are the assets we'll give you. You give it to him, and you say, go forth and optimize those as you get this mission done. One of them is the people. I do it that way because in my mind, it draws the box that I think is appropriate. Now, I also realize that they're the employees. They're not our employees. They're the employees of the district. And there are some specifically designated times when I can come down in here and talk to this person. For instance, Mary. Mary has a specific role where she facilitates a number of the things that you need to get done and information and things like that. That's a designated connection. It's a controlled interface. There may be others where there would be a committee that would come down and meet with that group on a particular issue, but that would be a board designated committee. And see, these are assignments, these are specific things. I'm messing up my shape there, but you see, if and when we decide that we're going to mess with this, there's a number of risky branches we can get out on. And certainly one of them is liability. Two is for unintended direction of a staff member. Because when you show up at a staff member's office, it's pretty meaningful. You're an elected official. You may not even know the fact that you're implying to do something one way versus the other. But is it appropriate for one of you unilaterally to be able to expend public funds to direct any of these people? No. Only you as a board, as a majority, can direct him to expend public funds. Otherwise, in fact, unilaterally, any of you can't even direct him to expend public funds. And so it's a nuance, but I tell you, once this structure, once that waste grows, and it starts going like this, all sorts of unfortunate things can happen. Now, part of this is written for that case. So the communication path, sorry for the lecture. The primary path of communication from board members should be to the general manager. Should be the general manager. Then general manager to staff, the district's attorney and consultants. Director should seek to develop and foster a working relationship with the general manager. That's a key. If you can just talk to him and he can get it done for you, which if he can't, then you got another thing, but generally he can, then you don't need to go down into the structure. Not really. Whereas issues, concerns, grievances, or district programs and or projects can be discussed openly and comfortably. That's what kind of relationship you want to have with your general manager. The general manager may occasionally delegate the communication directly to the board member or staff member for a particular issue. I was on the council for 23 years and I was mayor for 8 of them. I never violated that principle, only because I wanted to have very clear and high expectations of my executive. I didn't want to do anything to mess with his ability to be able to make highest and best use of that asset. I actually practiced that before I knew why it was so important, so I was really lucky by the time I started saying things about it, I hadn't violated it. Directed communication with staff. While communication between board members and staff is primarily handled through the general manager, board members, and here's the caveat, here's what the general manager is kind of handing to you. Board members may approach staff directly for simple information requests. As a courtesy, should make the general manager aware of such requests. If the board members are contacted by staff, the other way around, who are not formally designated for board communication, the board member should refer the employee to the appropriate staff supervisor or general manager. Professionalism, courtesy, and business-like approach to such communication is expected at all times. I can tell you that this happens a lot and it creates an awful lot of issues, and many agencies have these kinds of rules for cause, because in the past it was such a pervasive and difficult issue. The thing of it is that oftentimes they can hear things that you didn't intend from your discussion with them. Oftentimes you're really down there for some other reason. Maybe it's to find out how good a job he's doing. Well, that's not the right way to do it, because you don't, which one are you going to pick? The one that just got their performance evaluation, or the one that just... and so oftentimes you're there for reasons that are inappropriate. it's fun to be down here. I remember as mayor, when I'd show up at the wastewater treatment, we had water, police, fire, water, sewer, we had a full service city. So we had lots of, 85,000 people, we had about 400 employees. And I tried so hard, because I was teaching these classes, I was trying so hard not to be influential out here. But they couldn't help it. They just loved it when the mayor showed up. They loved it when the mayor would come and spend some time, and I had to be very, very careful. Now, when I would call the city manager, in my case, he could very well say, oh, it's all right to go down and talk to the chief, or it's okay to go down and talk to Kevin, and know that the chief or Kevin will probably fill me in on the discussion, or maybe I'll go with you down here and we'll talk to this engineer or that. I really am a believer in controlled interfaces, not just because I work at Lawrence Livermore, but because I think that controlled interfaces in this business are important, in this structure are important, and if we let those get out of control, they can spin very quickly in a bad direction. One more, and then we can discuss it. Non-interference with staff. Board members should refrain from making requests directly to district employees to undertake analyses, perform work assignments, or change the priority of work assignments.
That should change from should, they must,
Shall.
shall. Yeah, I mean, you can't do that.
But they can. You can't, but you can. So you could, Doug, this afternoon, show up on one of the, meaning,
Okay.
so, would it be appropriate? No.
Finish your second thought. I could.
You could go into a staff member's office and say, listen, I really need for you to look this. I need for you to do this for me. I need for you to get this report in for me. I didn't look at it this way. The rest of them don't want to look at it this way. I'm not even sure Greg does. I want you to look at this issue from my point of view. And you put that staff member in a real conundrum. So you can do it, but what you're saying is you shouldn't do it. It's not appropriate.
I'm saying as a board, we should have a policy that you can't. If I want that staff member to give me a report, I would say, Greg, everybody on the board is crazy but me, and you're crazy. Please have this person write the report from a different angle to see if there's a possibility that I'm right and everybody else is crazy. That's his job.
Right. And he may come back to you and say, that report's going to take 16 hours. I got to go back to the board for that.
And that's
authorization to do so. And that's the way it ought to kind of work. But, because there's this little caveat in here, simple informational reports.
And that I also agree with.
Yeah.
If I'm
It's
getting
a
a
little
tour,
ambiguous.
can I ask questions?
It's a little ambiguous. What is a simple information? How far is it? Is simple a two-hour request, or is simple a 2-day request? Anyway, you see what I'm getting. Roll that around a little bit and see what Tom has to say here.
What I think about this is I don't think we have a big problem except for calls to our attorney. And I think that should be really emphasized and restricted. I think we've had a lot of calls that the attorney ends up spending a lot of time on. That I think the board should, before that happens, we should see if the board wants to spend that money.
And there's one coming on that,
Yeah.
by itself, a standalone on that. So that will be for the next round.
Okay.
But you're right. And a lot of the reasons why boards are really keen on restricting their access to the attorney is because, Andrea, forgive me, the attorney's so expensive.
Yeah, and can I just make a brief comment on that, just to put it into context? And it shouldn't be surprising at all to the board, because when I came on board, I drafted and sent out a memo to the board about my role and how I view it and what my style is. And I made clear that I want to be available to respond to director's questions, but frankly, the Brown Act makes that really difficult for me outside of open sessions or closed sessions where everybody's in the room. And so my preference is that the general manager be something of an intermediary, and as this board knows, when I do receive legal questions from a specific board member, which has happened, even if it's just from one board member, my response goes to the entire board for a couple reasons. One, other board members may share the same question. And of course, the board in its entirety should benefit from my advice, because the board in its entirety is my client and not any one of you. And second, I can best protect the attorney-client privilege if I communicate with the whole board. And and not just one or more of you. And then as a practical matter, when my costs are up because 1 or 2 or 3 board members are individually asking me questions, I think it's useful for the entire board to know that somebody has asked a question, what it was, and what the answer is.
Yeah, but I think it should go further than that. I think that if you're spending a certain amount of time, you shouldn't do it until you poll the board. Do we want to do that? Do we want to answer that question?
It's like instead of the informational item, it's the analysis.
Yeah, do we want to spend 2 hours?
That's, yeah, do we want to spend 2 days on that, or is it okay?
Right.
Well, that's actually, what Tom said was 2 hours, and what you said was 2 days. If we go through the general manager, I think that the general manager should be authorized to say, yeah, it's a 2-hour question.
That's
But it's an
exactly
important
what
one,
I
because
think.
it's, the next meeting's not for a month, and I need to know the answer to that.
Yeah.
But I would never, I can imagine calling the attorney directly, I would always speak to Greg.
I agree completely.
So in essence, if I had a question about a recent major trial, I should call Greg and say, hey, I need to run something by the attorney. Because I haven't done that, and I don't contract her that much, but is that what you're wanting?
Yep, that's what I want.
That's what I want.
I'm asking Bill Greg, is that what you
Well,
feel would be better?
I haven't, and I'm not dodging the question, I obviously have a practical view, but I will
You're gonna be the
actually put
big
this back
club.
to you guys, because your relationship with the legal counsel is independent of mine as general manager. I report to you as general manager to the board. Legal counsel independently reports to you as legal counsel to the board. And as Andrea and I have talked about in the past, I mean, we strive, to work very closely together with the board, and I think that generally is of course what happens. But I would, that's a long way of dodging your question, Pam. I would say it's something you guys have to decide on. I will say this from a practical perspective, there's a big element of, I hate to use an overword, the common sense term here, but there is a big element of good judgment. It's just like to me, it's sort of like the appropriate occasional request to staff. Can you find me a copy of that report that we talked about 2 months ago? If it's a financial item and you know that, the finance person has it and, that's the kind of thing that goes on all the time and it's completely appropriate. And then, same thing I think with this. So if someone does bring me any type of request like that, I'm going to be very responsive to it. I'm going to immediately work with legal counsel and you, whoever the board member is, to get a satisfactory, hopefully, answer back to you. And if it needs further attention, we can always, to me, that is an appropriate role for the board president to bring in and say, look, we've discussed this, here's kind of where we're at. So to me, it's an incremental approach, but generally speaking, I'm going to look to you guys to use your best judgment and work directly with legal counsel. We've had some very unusual, obviously historic circumstances in the past 1 or 2 years, and those are sort of a bookend of how, where things can be on a continuum. So I would just sort of caution, that we don't use that measure too much because it's such an unusual couple of year period. But that's a long answer. I look to you guys to work together. I've always had, in my experience, the benefit of having a good working relationship between legal counsel and general manager and the board is invaluable because we're a team. And we have to be able to share ideas and concerns and recommendations effectively to do our jobs. So anyway, that's how I look at it.
Yeah, I don't see it as a problem. I mean, I usually tell you or ask you.
Yes, yeah.
And I don't, it's
Others
very
do too.
infrequent.
Yeah.
Prior,
All right.
though, we were,
Let's defer further discussion on this until we're actually looking at a policy regarding council. I sense there's not, we're not going to agree on it. Not necessarily today, and it's actually not the
And it
topic
is
of this policy.
So,
Correct.
relative to this policy, remember, the kind of the communication path of part A is that fostering a working relationship with the general manager. And that's kind of saying we gotta trust each other here, that we're all after the same thing. Now, maybe the details of how that's defined aren't specifically the same all the time. But we're all in this for them, and remember I've often told you all, and others as well, that commit yourself to the mission. That's where you find true motives. Commit yourself to the mission and nothing else. And Greg wants the mission to happen, you all want the mission to happen, you want it to proceed, you want to protect, you want to move it forward. And so in doing so, if you can trust one another, then you can have that relationship. And then these other things are really not a problem.
I have a question though. Let's say I need to call Julie and there's some money issue or something, or there's something incorrect. Do you want me to call you first? Or do you want me to email her direct? Because all the rules have changed, since the last 2 or 3 years.
If
Everything
it's
is kind of wide open.
If it's like you've been to a conference and you're trying to work on
Just
your
go directly with Julie.
expense report or something, yeah, I'd
Okay.
say contact the staff person,
Yeah, that's one of those designated,
Okay.
but you're right, that's a good question. That's absolutely right, to know, well, where are the lines?
Well,
If there are-
and I got caught off guard when Mary came on. Prior to that, I emailed her for something that I had been emailing for years about. I can't remember what it was, and all of a sudden Greg says, no, you can't email, you have to
We
go
have-
through me. I'm like,
yeah,
oh.
we have tried to not have,
It's fine, but
Yeah.
I didn't know that had changed so
Yeah.
dramatically, but actually it's good.
I can imagine it might make sense if one of us is contacting a staff member directly to CC Greg, in the case that our judgment about the appropriateness of the direct staff contact is something Greg, he should at least know, right?
Well, it says as a courtesy,
Yeah,
should make, but maybe you could change that to a more definitive statement and say, and will make the general manager aware of such request. Instead of, and as a courtesy, but will, not should, would be
Yeah.
the. Got that, Tom? You with? I didn't know if you had that. All right, so, we good on this one?
I
I'd
think
like to just make
Yes.
one point, which I don't think is anything we haven't said, but I'm walking down Sir Francis Drake in San Anselmo, and there's a pipe broken, and there's some people working on it. I feel like I could say, hey, what's going on, without, that seems like a normal, everyday,
entirely.
common thing that would occur to me.
This gets so much to motives.
Yeah.
You know about
The mission.
It's just, if you say, hey, what's going on? Oh, they've got some broken pipes here, but they're fixing. You go, oh, okay. So how's everything else going? What do you really think?
Why using plastic pipes?
Why use plastic?
Did we buy from that guy?
Does that have those valves in it? See,
But you still have your right as a citizen that's not a board
Sure.
member.
You-
You just need to separate out the two.
you always have the
Yeah.
rights of
But the
the
staff
citizen.
doesn't see it that way.
But you also have a public responsibility here. And you are given that public responsibility, and you do, by virtue of that, have some constraints. And so really, remember, what you're trying to do is optimize this thing. And it's best if it keeps this shape in some respect, in order for that to go forward in the best possible manner.
right.
And so, it gets back to, I'm writing a book on the subject right now, and so I'm really into this motives thing. Because what I find when I dig down underneath many of these issues, the root cause, it gets back to those motives, pride and ego and power and individualistic motives about me, and so that has no place in the ideal public structure, but it exists. All right, thank you for that. Very good. Okay, we've made some changes to this. Placing items on the board agenda. Now, I'll just read it, and you all can give me your perspective. This policy provides clarity and guidance regarding placing items for consideration on the agenda of the board of directors for discussion, direction, and action. The general manager is considered the organizer and manager of the agenda. Board of directors meeting, I should just say, of the board of directors meeting agenda. Board members may request that the general manager or board president place items for discussion or direction, discussion, direction, or action on future board meeting agendas. Such request must be made at least 1 month prior to the distribution of the board packet. Remember, that's a week preparation consideration is even before that, to allow time for staff to provide supporting background on the item. Board members may request at the close of a board meeting before the adjournment that the director consider placing a matter, that the district consider placing a matter on a future agenda. Best practice prior to requesting an item to be placed on the agenda is to write a short email or a memo to the general manager and or board president explaining the item and giving the reason why it is a matter that the full board should consider. If the item cannot be placed on the agenda in a timely manner, the board president or the general manager will provide an explanation to the requesting board member. District council, as needed, district council may place items on the agenda as required. So, thoughts on this?
I'd add one thing, and that is that at any meeting at the end, when board members are asked as part of the meeting, if you'd like to add something to the agenda in the future, then a majority of board members can put it on the agenda, period. If three of us say it's on the agenda, then it's on the agenda, in my opinion.
Of course.
Well, I'm wondering why the old policy's not here, so we can compare, because we do have a policy.
Where is it?
We have a current policy, how to put things on the agenda, this is replacing it. So for me, I'd like to see the old to replace the new, and see why we are replacing the new, and maybe the new's better, which is fine. But I was here when that other policy was made, and I know why. Because the board president blocked agenda items for months and months and months, and finally we got a policy so a board member could get something on the agenda. But if this is an improvement, which I think it is.
There is a current one, I was gonna try to find a quick copy of it.
Did you
Some
all
of the-
look at it?
Some of
or
the same
not?
material, yeah, so we have considered it.
This is different in that there was some language about two board members having to put it on. And that's been your practice, so that is a change, and perhaps that would have been a good gap to be able to point out to you, is that this is a change. But this is in just terms of governance practice, this seems reasonable for a individual board member to be able to make the case to put something on the agenda. But in general terms, the general manager and the board president do, and in some cases for cause, the attorney needs to. But one of the issues you point out, Pam, is right, is when a board member does request something, it's that clock that happens. And if you're waking up 6 months later and saying, whatever happened to my request for that board, then there's a gap somewhere. Somewhere there's a gap, and that gap should not occur. I always recommend that the manager have a kind of a running file of the kinds of things that I see on the forecast for the agenda, and then probably on the city council, and next month, and 2 months, and 3 months out, we think we're going to be dealing with these items. And if you can look at that forecast and don't see your item, then you can bring it up and say, why don't I see on my item that, or is there some issue with it, and you can have a discussion.
Yeah, I had actually, this happened to me, I was kind of, the squeaky wheel finally got the oil, but it was the disability or lower rate for disabled, and I didn't know they actually were working on it until like 2 or 3 months went by, and then finally I asked, and he said, yeah, we're working on it, we gotta pull this together. So some things do take longer to work out.
Sure they do.
That's the reality, and so, yeah.
Communication is the key there. I mean,
Yeah, so but
but
some things,
3 months
when
go
the
well.
agendas, we went now from 2 meetings a month to 1.
Yeah.
So it's really hard now to get things sooner on the agenda than it was in the past. All right?
Yeah, and also just, one of the considerations that I am trying to balance as general manager, and I think, generally apply to the overall situation is, we have a steady volume of what I'll simply call regular business. It's everything from construction contracts to all the annual business we do, from budgets to what have you. And the regular business fills up, and particularly I think in this district in the last few years, makes for a substantial amount of board action, I think, by any reasonable measure. So that's left us with not a lot of capacity for many of the just optional types of issues and so forth. That hasn't been, we haven't had as the luxury of addressing those as much and as often as we would like to as an organization. So, but I will tell you, I mean, as a board, look, anytime that if an individual board member has an issue, they've followed this general protocol, they've said, something I'm interested in, we've considered it. If a majority of the board, a quorum of the board down the road through further discussion says, you know what, this is a priority, it needs to move up. Staff, our job is to move it up. We're not, and I appreciate the patience, on some of these issues like the one that Marin says has been taking time to move to the front. But you guys should know that if you get to a quorum of support in a sense of, you know what, we all agree this is important, you shouldn't have any doubt. I mean, staff is going to be responsible for that. If we're not doing our job. Okay, so that's just something to keep in mind. But those are just two things. One, we definitely wrestle with a limited capacity of what's available in terms of just getting you business to crank through. And number two, anytime it becomes the consensus direction of the board, you hopefully will not be seeing any delay on those items. Because that's a big difference between one, because you all, very understandably, anyone on the board is going to have things that they somehow really like to see us move. But if you get the quorum consensus on it, you should know.
Okay, so my next question is kind of a sensitive question, but who ultimately makes a decision? Let's say Mary says, no, I don't want to do that. I don't think that's important, or we'll have to put that off. And so who actually makes these agreements for items to be on the agenda?
I would say,
Most
for
of
the,
you?
practically speaking, for the most part right now, myself and Andrea, in consultation with whoever is the current board president, have been, quickly reviewing. And again, 9 times out of 10, it's a situation where we're having to take stuff off the agenda because we have so much business. We're like, okay, which of these do we want to postpone? We just don't have enough, time. But that's the short answer to your question, Pam, is we manage that on a month-to-month basis, looking ahead to the rest of the fiscal year and so forth. But that's it.
I mean, maybe in the future, not now, but maybe we need to look at having a second meeting, not every month, but to catch up.
For capacity.
Yeah, just, here and there, maybe every 3 months.
Sure.
Yeah, okay.
Greg, is that set of kind of, you had a big bunch of institutional work to do here. Is that set diminishing now or over the next 6 months? 3 years?
I honestly have expected it to, but it has been surprisingly persistent. And every time I even hint that that's the case to Mary Brown. So we're hoping it slows down, but the reality is it's still pretty busy right now.
Yeah.
But I remember, just to make your point about if the majority of the board comes around to something is important that you've said, well, I think we can put that off, the connection fees. That Frank was advocating, let's redo our connection fee, price, charge. And you said, well, no, let's wait until the bond, I think the bond guy was gonna calculate what the real, and he said, no, I think we should do this now. And then the majority of the board ended up saying, no, we should do this now. And you did it, we did it, we moved it up, so from my perspective, the staff sets a draft of the agenda, and then the president of the board gets to review that, and then it's, basically a consensus decision. Or the process works as I believe it should. But it's hard, because we're doing lots of capital work every single month.
Lots of decisions relative to that.
But maybe we should think about like a placeholder for, the sort of more, less dollars out the door for capital work. Every month we agree that we're gonna do 1 or 2 of those things.
Kind of like policies. And then you finally said, oh, let's just do workshops, we do a lot of them.
Right,
Exactly.
exactly, you're right, and then, yeah.
It's something similar to this at times. But the other thing too, I really recommend the forecast idea because it clarifies the communications. That you know something, it's okay, yeah, I haven't seen it, I wonder where it's at, I look at the forecast, oh, I see, it's up 3 months from now.
Right, Right.
That's all right, well, or maybe I'll bring it up the next one. We just kind of decide we're gonna do it for the next 2 months and see if Greg can't wedge it in there somewhere. I mean, it's a collective kind of effort then, rather than any grounds at all for suspicion that somebody may have messed around with.
No, I think that's a good idea, because I think the cyclical things like the budget or the audit or those things that we're gonna see every single year at the same time on the agenda, so then we can see where the agenda might have, you know, more space for, you know, what I would call it, you know, sort of special projects. Right.
What are other comments on this one? Tom, you have anything? I see you right.
Well, yeah, what I was saying is, should we add its policy that the GM, I don't think it would be more work, but the GM to provide a probable forecast of future agenda items? And right at the bottom of our agenda each month would be possible future.
You all, it's up to you all.
Well, you're saying it's sort of like rolling, I mean, the way we have the
It is a rolling.
the rolling, whatever 5-year plan, we have the rolling
They
agenda.
probably got it. They probably
You got
already
it?
got it.
We
We
have,
have
we
it
have
some level.
the parts and pieces of it, yes.
Yeah, it's just a matter of packaging it for you all so it's understandable. That doesn't preclude you from putting a mention of it in here, but it's up to you all.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I just see it as sort of a way for the board to communicate with Greg about, you know.
Why don't you like that way?
I got the feeling over the past year that when a board member wanted to get something on the agenda, they would either mention it at the board meeting or through information interchange with Greg. And I don't think we're limited by the number of board meetings or capacity of the board meetings, but by the capacity of what the district can actually handle. I don't, see anybody sitting here on their hands looking for things to do. And I think those, it's like our IAM, the Information Asset Management Plan. There's a list of things to do, and the top group and the priorities are the ones that are going to be on the next agenda. And if something gets moved up in priority, it'll get moved up onto the agenda. Otherwise, it's brewing there. I mean, yeah, there's a forecast of things to happen, but those that are in the red zone get moved up to the top and get accomplished sooner. And like Mary just gave an example of one where the board said, okay, no, this is important enough that we want it moved up into that red zone, and it got there right away. But I think we're not limited by board time. I think we're limited by really what our particular staff and what they're handling currently can do. And if the board throws more stuff at them, then some things that they're doing have to then move down the list. So it's, I think it worked quite well for me over the past year. So this seems all fine to me.
Mary?
I'm fine with this.
So is your point that asking them to do a forecast is yet another task that?
If somebody, Greg has always been available and open to discuss anything, anytime, I think with any board member. And if there's something of concern to us, he's always been available to see it in writing. It's just.
But I think we get some consensus here, Chair, whether or not we're just kind of asking for it, or want to put it here, or not even.
The forecast, is that what?
Well,
Yeah.
Just my suggestion, and definitely we'll do whatever you guys think will work. I think that these last two sentences do a pretty good job of, making it clear there's an obligation on the part of the general manager and the board president to work together to give feedback as to, what's happening with your request. And so my suggestion is keep it at that high level. The sort of the tools and the process that we'll use to do that, certainly that's something that sort of can be worked out on the fly. If you guys at any time don't feel like it's being, of course, addressed properly, then we need to improve that. So I think at the staff level, just based on today's discussion, we'll start looking at keeping more of a forecasting calendar that we can share.
Okay.
Because I do think we've been looking at that for other reasons, actually, just for business process balancing, and I think it would be helpful. So I think we'll go ahead and do that independent, but I feel my own professional recommendation is a little less prescriptive here, keeps you, takes care of things.
It's kind of on you.
Yeah.
It's kind of on you.
So-
Yeah, right, and that's our.
All right, so I would propose that we leave out any specific mention of the forecast right now from this policy, always knowing that we can revisit it, but it sounds like it may become just practice anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. All right, is that all right with everyone?
And Mary says lunch is here, and maybe now's a good time for a break. Is that
Yeah,
right?
great.
Yeah,
Everybody
here.
Okay, thank you. We're temporarily and back with Board Professional Development, Training and Education. Is that where
We are. We're at the board policy for professional development, training, and education. The policy provides clarity for current and future board members regarding the opportunities for board development, training, and education. So there are 4 different pieces of this. A is required, and that's the way to look at it. You all must have these kinds of training, which is ethics and harassment. B is for a new board member, for new board members as they come on, to have a district queued up new board orientation. C is for your own performance. It's a best practice biannual board self-assessment, and one of the questions is biannual too much or not enough? And then D is development. The board member development is kind of what you do when you're going to trainings and so forth. And so I'd like to kind of open it for questions. I know that Tom had some questions on harassment prevention training, and you're working right now to begin providing that class for the board members. And so I think that's on the near horizon, or reasonably near horizon for you all.
CSDA doesn't have a harassment seminar type thing? Or?
They do, but it's not an online kind of thing,
It's not
as I recall. Yeah.
But if you go to those meetings.
If you go to the meetings and it says you get the certificate,
Yeah, no, when I did that afternoon meeting at CASA, did that cover both of these?
no.
just covered-
Well, if it was in 4 hours,
Yes.
could. You need to get a hold of Debbie Welch at CASA and ask her in theory, they should distribute a certificate for each one.
Yeah.
If you,
Yeah.
I didn't look
I
at it that
have a
way.
question that's probably for the lawyer. Just curious if it matters the way the law is written. I'm certain I did a ethics training in my last year, because I did it regularly. I didn't have to do it on Park and Rec. In my last year on council, which is less than a year old now, do I need to do another one within my first year, or am I covered by my old one?
You're covered.
The law is silent on that. I think to be safe, you should do it within a year of taking office in your new position.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure, because I was asking, and I think, maybe I'll bring this up the point, I said I was going to pass on the August CASA,
Mhm.
but wanted to do the fall one,
Mhm.
and so I'm sure they'll do one at the fall
That'll
one
be an
if
opportunity
if
there,
the
yeah,
board
yeah.
allows me to go, which I'm sure the board will.
You know, you could also find one online, which I usually don't recommend, but since you've done one likely in person in the past year, this may be a good reason to do one online.
Okay. Well, I think CASA will have one for me, we'll probably do harassment then at that.
the FPPC, you can find that, and others too. But those two are required of you when you're working out the details of how you all get those. But the district of Mary ought to have a file that has all your certificates and be able to show anybody that wants to see it that you're all up to date and maybe in differing
We're
layers.
supposed to put them on our website.
Yeah, okay, that's a great place to do it as well, sure. And then the next is new board member orientation, and just outlines the kinds of things that you feel ought to be there. So that's just something that you feel as a board is going to be important. I really am a proponent of new board member orientations because I think it's a real opportunity to help new board members understand the concepts of service and this specific service and the authorities and responsibilities and the things that aren't authorities and aren't the responsibilities. So just to clarify the roles and then to clarify the context of this service. So it's a good process. It's a project for someone, but it's certainly one of those, the only opportunity you have with some new board, because not every new board member comes on like Doug, having some background. The next election could have someone with no background, and so it's helpful to give them some background. Then the self-assessment is something new that I threw in there again, and looking for best practices, I threw in that one as well. A board self-assessment basically leads to something, generally leads to a workshop, kind of a how are we doing workshop. So you do an assessment, and then you review the results of that assessment in a workshop. And so if you're going to have a planning kind of workshop anyway, this is a good basis for that. And so I thought I'd throw that in there to see if you all feel comfortable with that kind of a self-developing, self-evaluating kind of thing. And then there's the ongoing leadership. It encourages the Special District Leadership Foundation recognition for every board member. It's not required, it's encouraged. And what that does is there are 4 courses in that. There's foundations, which is obviously the foundation, the setting direction, community leadership. There's the board member and finances, and there's the board member and human resources. So that you, again, it's understanding your roles well. It's something that I had the opportunity to be part of the curriculum development on that set of courses back a number of years ago now. So, and so you can see that there are 3 that are kind of put together, 2 were put together. And then there's also, you have the opportunity to subscribe to other kinds of training, which is online training and so forth. There at the last. Thoughts and questions about this one?
Do you have a self-assessment form, like for your biannual board? You know, like we do the GM assessment?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's something like that. And look, you don't have to do, I want to point out, this doesn't have to be done by me, or honestly, it doesn't have to be done by an outside person at all. I think it's best when it's done that way, and you have a workshop somewhere like this, but it doesn't have to be done by me. I just wanted to put that this
Yeah,
way.
but I was asking about a form, you know, that.
Yeah, tools, yeah,
And then maybe somebody collates it,
yeah,
and we see,
yeah.
gee, this is an area that we need to talk about, and that's all we have to do.
Right, right. And as a client, you're certainly welcome to have the tool that I use, and you can do it internally if you like, or have somebody work with you if you want.
Pam?
Same thing, just criteria, what kind of tool. I think it's a great idea, because if there's things that are not being handled well, it's an opportunity. And there's also the opportunity to say how good we're doing.
Absolutely.
I mean, you know, it's the district has this long, dark history, so. Anyway, no, I think it's a great idea. You could make it really simple, too, you know.
I would do it, I thought you said workshop, I would do that at a agendized meeting, because it gives the public the opportunity, whether they take it or not, to say, you know what? All of you guys are saying you're doing a great job, you know, you stink.
These criteria, we don't think, yeah. Well, and of course, you know that this is an agendized and a time, this meeting
no, I
is
understand.
now, but in a more regular meeting setting is what you're saying. Technically, that would certainly be something you could decide, whether you call it a workshop or you just call it a report. But the idea of a workshop is to have time to discuss the gaps between good policy or good protocols and maybe practice, where you all rated yourself more locally. Anything else? Yes.
So you 2 went through a new board member orientation, correct? Something?
Yeah, I did a tour.
I did
Okay,
that.
okay.
Yeah.
But
We
we
sat in here.
and I did not when I joined the board, and I don't think you
I have
did
not.
when you joined the board. So is it something like what you did for them on
It
an
can
ad
be.
hoc basis?
It can be. I think I sent that PowerPoint to you guys, so you've got the information.
Will you send that, Greg, to the board members?
Yeah, sure, I've got, and it was, you're on, let's see, it would have been 2014, I think, at this point. So it was just something we did somewhat on the fly at that point. We thought it would be a good practice to try and get into, and That's, I think, part of this. But yeah, we have the materials you used at that point, Brent. And in the structure of this, what it actually looks like is something that, again, we would just, I think, work out on a practical basis and defer to the board on what you know, what you think is useful. We have a standard binder of materials we provide. It's more of the facts and figures and direct information on the district. I think what that was supplemented with in the 2014 effort was just the more of the broader guidance and best practices. So it's not meant to be anything, I think, at least from staff's perspective, the way when we talked about this, you know, it's a simple, you know, 1 to 2 hour sit down, whatever we think is useful, and there's materials provided and structured. That's what we had in mind for the orientation. And it can, you know, the details again would be the kind of thing that we just work out.
Right.
So.
I think it's a good idea to have, you know, something in place and some consistency every election cycle. I could have used it. in
That's why it's
2020.
good to have it in policy, so everybody's
Uh-huh.
clear about the fact that.
And have you gotten a chance to do a tour of?
I have not, I've been scheduled and I've canceled twice.
You
So
know
I've
it's
been
good.
offered, it's not,
Okay.
I mean, we're gonna get it done because I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. I think that's another great thing, to have people go out and see what some of the
Yeah.
facilities were actually
Yes,
charged.
Steve, what's his name? The engineer?
Makes sense.
Yes.
He said you can actually open and look inside the force mains or something like that. Is that true?
That's
Oh,
something.
maybe I shouldn't have
said. Just pick the right location.
And with supervision.
She's careful.
Because we're gonna go on a tour.
Yeah, I like that idea, and I like the idea of, you know, encouraging additional training and providing us with a variety of resources to do that.
Yeah, the variety of resources is important, because not everybody can go to training, not everybody wants training in-house, and so you provide them with a suite of cafeteria options.
Any other comments on this item? That's pretty straightforward.
All right, the next one is associations and memberships. This policy provides clarity regarding the board's associations locally and outside the district. And there are, the point of this policy is to clarify the nature of board delegated assignments and to be sure that we understand those, and also what the board members in those assignments are responsible for, and out of the assignments, when they're just attending a meeting, and how different that can be in terms of your what you can and should not represent when you're not board delegated. So there are a number of things that the board holds memberships in. CSDA is one of them, CAS is the other. Every year in July, you're going to appoint representatives to associations and memberships. Also, the CSRMA and the NBWA, LAFCO, and so forth. And in that case, you vote, hold a formal position representing the district, recognize that you're representing the opinions of the board as a body. In that case, it's a very clear delegation of your representative voice in that ancillary body. The last paragraph said when board members are attending meetings on their own interest, which are ancillary to the district business, and specifically representative of the board, when not specifically representative of the board, members are cautioned that they are not authorized to officially represent the board. And that seems like common sense, but it's important to write it down somewhere. You're just not authorized. You're not authorized. It doesn't mean you won't do it, or somebody may not do it, but you're not authorized by this board to do so. And those are also meetings that are not generally thought of as eligible for compensation for the district board compensation policy, which we're going to look at here later. District may at times may specifically assign its members to such meetings as it serves the district's business. You all have the authority to delegate these, is really what this is saying. And so thoughts and questions on this one?
I just think it's really clear, needs to be known and clear when you get up to speak at these meetings. Like LAFCO, I'm not a voting member, but I'm sort of the representative from here. If I'm speaking about myself, I think I need to state that. I'm speaking as a citizen, I'm not speaking as a LAFCO rep. And sometimes that happens in these meetings, and sometimes it doesn't, and you gotta be careful.
So you're this district doesn't hold the special district seat at LAFCO.
Correct.
So you're not a voter, you're just kind of checking and reporting, but you're designated to do so.
But for North Bay, I am the voting member.
Right. So there's,
So if I wanted to step out to be a citizen, I would need to say I'm speaking as a citizen, not as a voting.
even here, if you wanted to speak
Oh,
as a
that's right, I
citizen,
forgot
you
about
get
that.
up and well, I've seen it done a number of times. It's generally odd and awkward. You know what I'm saying? Because for a reason. There's a reason. I can't be part of my colleagues right now. I've got to be somebody else.
Well, if you're speaking on an issue that's next door to your house, you're not allowed to, you can step in the audience and speak as a private citizen.
In some cases, that's true. And it happens.
Well, again, nobody loses their right to free speech because you're elected to something.
It's where there's money conflict and material interest. And again, that's a very specific, there's an 8-point test to determining what's material interest, and that's something for your attorney to explain to you at some point in time. If you ever think you might have a material meaning your, a true conflict of interest relative to your income or your compensation or whatever your business, you always should run that through Greg to the attorney, and that's one thing the attorney can advise you specifically on because of your specific role as a board member and your potential specific conflict. But that's about the only role, generally speaking, that an attorney will advise you specifically, but because of the specific issues. And that's just relative to conflict. So, what else here?
I think it's pretty straightforward.
So the next one is appointment to Joint Powers Authority Commission, and as you know, that's CMSA for the most part. Well, I guess it's for the only part, isn't it? And so this is the CMSA representative, and I don't believe that there's anything here that bears such a huge change to what you understand is to be true now. So I wasn't planning on reading this to you, but I guess I want to welcome questions here.
Well, the situation here is that CMSA meets on the second week, and we meet on the third week. And so I think there's been a history of, just our commissioners just voting not having the opportunity to get our district's position on, like a majority of our board member position before they go to CMSA. So we're trying to rectify that by having a meeting with CMSA. Well, it's still the timing's off, isn't it? Because we.
Well, so just because I think this is something that, I'll say quite clearly, as general manager, I was encouraging of the board, at least considering this type of policy. But, and it wasn't, so it's not intended, at least as the reason we brought it forward, it's not intended to address sort of the mechanics of, meeting timing and so forth, and even communication, specifically how you want to do that. It was really simply to put a clear emphasis, on this very structured and very important relationship, and also to, again, to the extent the board thinks this makes sense, to set some high-level expectations of what is this board expecting of the appointed commissioners in terms of carrying out important business. Are you expecting them to come and get consensus on key issues? And I'll give you a perfect example because it's my favorite one. It's very simple, and it's just that one example. when I first started here at the district, CMSA and its commissioners, which included 2 Ross Valley board members, had just finished approving its newest 5-year financial plan, which included what their expenses were going to be and what their revenue plan is. Well, their revenue plan is the charges to the member agencies, quite simple. And that is in turn about 50% of our operating costs. So when I, at the time, had a brief discussion with those board members, said, wow, this is pretty significant. This is going to up our costs by 20-odd, 30% cumulatively over the next 5 years. What was the preceding discussion, and what are our thoughts as an agency as to what we're going to do with this? At the time, it was very clear that there had been no discussion. There had been no consideration, and that's just one good example. So the idea here is not that, we talked about this the other, at one of the prior board meetings, it's not to get prescriptive about how you're carrying out your business as commissioners and so forth. It was really just intended, to the extent you guys think it's appropriate, to set the high-level expectations of how you envision the commissioners representing a consensus opinion, or certainly a consensus awareness and direction from the Ross Valley Board on matters that you deem of that level of importance. There are many, many issues of regular business at CMSA that, speaking from a distance, I would assume it would say, do not rise to this level. You're a commissioner, you're taking care of business, it's fine. This was meant for those types of things. Wow, we're making a decision that's going to affect the next 5 years of the financials of the Ross Valley. We're making decisions about, very important policy items that we are going to have to support in some fashion, whatever they might be. And of course, that's a judgment call. And that would be, this is intended to leave room for that deference to the board members and the commissioners, say, well, this rises to that level. That's what was behind bringing this to you as a recommendation. It's completely up to you guys whether you think it's even useful. We have no such policy currently, and that was what was behind the suggestion.
I think it's necessary, useful, really important, because it is almost like, we have handed the steering wheel over to somebody else, and, either you can look at that as CMSA, of which we are not the majority of the board members, even though we're the majority of the money flowing in there, or the 2 board members who we, appoint to go do that. But I think we really, as a full body, need to know when those big decisions are being made.
Well, that's one of the reasons that Tom and I suggested that once a month before the board meeting with CMSA, that we do the same committee kind of a meeting with Jason, with Greg here. The kind of big ticket items, the budget kind of things aren't figured out in 4 weeks, and then all of a sudden they're popped on us, so the timing doesn't exactly matter. We'll know about that months in advance, and we'll maybe be able to have some more input from an agency point of view directly into CMSA in that way. Just to have discussions that are not with 4 other board members who don't care about us, and to be able to just sit and be able to talk what's going on between the 2 agencies and how is it going to affect us directly this year, next year, 5 years, and to be able to have those, and then that we will be able to report back with a report to this.
But that doesn't solve, A, that doesn't solve the underlying problem, and B, that doesn't really change much, except that you've excluded Corte Madera and the other CMSA board members. It seems to me that if there's large budgetary issues, which, as you mentioned, don't come up all the time, that would be an opportunity for us to have an additional meeting with all of us, which at the same time, we could throw in some of the, as Pam said, things we're pushing aside because we don't have enough time. Maybe once a quarter or twice a year, we have a special meeting because something's coming up in CMSA. It doesn't do us as a board any good that you and Tom meet Because you and Tom are already meeting.
No, you're exactly right, but that's the whole point, is that by having a committee meeting just first, then as an agenda item, we bring back at a regular board meeting to discuss with the full board.
If there's enough time before the CMSA meeting.
If there's enough time before the
But
CMSA.
there isn't,
The
because we
problem-
meet after the CMSA meetings.
Well, but the problem was that, for example, the 5-year budget was passed and nothing came before this board, so maybe we can intercept it.
Yeah.
You know, there is a lead time, 3 months, and Jason isn't trying to rush anything through it, but there wasn't a method for, it was very difficult to understand, just in one meeting.
Oh, yeah.
I think we get into more details, much more details in our meetings here than they get in there. And so that was the plan, to kind of give us some heads up, and then we can tell the board, hey, look.
Right,
look
and
what's
the
gonna go
committee-
on. And then we'll put
Yeah.
an agenda item on it, and bring it to the board. That's a good idea.
Yeah, the committee could either recommend that we do have a special meeting because there's really something that we should deliberate as a full body and
Oh my
in
gosh,
a
this is
short
really
term.
important, yeah.
Or if there's enough lead time, put it on the next regular agenda. And I mean, the other thing I will say about this is it's not, I think we could change our dynamic with CMSA. It really became more deliberative about it because I've spoken to Brent about this one-on-one. The process there is so different from the process here. The process there is everybody's like, yep, okay, bye, see you next month. You know, it is, and I know that there are committee meetings that I wasn't a part of during the year that I was a CMSA board member last year, but I felt like that we were on a roller coaster ride, just pass everything on the agenda and get out the door. It wasn't very deliberative. And so I would like us to try to change the culture of that if possible.
And then the other item which Michael discovered was that there was areas that we wanted to share with Central Marin. For example, our testing. And they have a fantastic lab, which we're paying for, but we were sending out some of our tests to private companies
Really?
and spending more, as opposed to using their
Right.
overhead.
Right.
And probably we have to pay them some,
Yeah.
but not as much, and we'd all benefit from it. So areas where we can do greater cooperation, and, sharing.
We are, on that one, we are back to using their lab services.
Exactly. Well, that's, because we found out, and,
Yeah.
about it. And then we want to explore other areas like, we talked about it before, but SCADA and maybe operating our big giant pump stations. They're pretty good at that. So anyway, areas for more interagency cooperation and more time to really understand what CMSA is doing.
So do we need to change anything about this, or are we just saying that we're happy with?
Are we done?
No.
Oh, so I understand what Doug's saying. We could change our meetings if we really want, if we're really serious, and change our meeting date so that we do meet before they meet. That's one option. I was on the board for a year and I had the same exact critique you had, Mary. Bringing up anything was sort of pushed aside and moved on, and I felt really sad because this is supposed to be a JPA. There's issues around people being appointed for so many years that the culture, I felt, was very stuck or staying in its way. So I applaud any of you who want to dive in and make change, because it's really needed there badly. So that's my suggestion, is to move our meeting, and that way we can all meet and talk. If the two board members want to meet, I think it's okay. But I don't know.
It's half our budget, it's important.
It is, but I just want to make sure that the whole board makes whatever decision that arises and that we're really educated. Now, who's ever on the financial committee on CMSA, you have, because I was on that for 1 year, and they do plan really early for that.
Yeah.
So that is something that we could really look at. And I actually talked to Greg about it when this was all going down, but this is all new. This is a bigger change now.
But, well, and I think that budget item is a good example where, and I would encourage you to separate out sort of this is really framing the expectations that you're setting for the commissioners. then the mechanics of how you structure the communications and the coordination is a whole other thing that I wouldn't suggest goes into the policy. And so things like, the meeting timings and so forth, for today, I keep those as a separate topic. And the last thing I say on that is has already been mentioned. Whatever you might sort of think they could do differently, one thing I think that they do very well is they do, from what I've seen, CMSA has very long lead times. They're very methodical and structured in how they go through business for the most part. So when you take something like the budget, I wouldn't expect us to be caught short in terms of meeting cycle.
Right.
The regular meeting cycle would give you plenty of time to say, and then I would emphasize the discretionary aspect of that. What we're looking to the commissioners, I would suggest to provide that judgment. There's some default issues, like maybe it's like the budgets, the 5-year forecast and so forth, that you're going to bring back. But others are a matter of good judgment. Okay, this is something, and then the full board hears that recommendation from the commissioners and says, okay, yeah, let's make some time to talk about this. But it's, the key there is that discretion of what rises to that business. Because as you all know from that discussion we had at the July meeting, you can quickly, it's a slippery slope to start getting into now you're not trying to manage and weigh in on all of the regular business of that other agency. You have two separate agencies or two separate boards here. What you're trying to focus on, this is suggesting, is those really important big picture issues, financial commitments, big policy, legal issues, et cetera, to where you can get consensus and then you can represent it effectively back at the commission. That's what this is about, and I think, again, the timing of board cycles is really not going to affect this, because ultimately, if you draw that cycle long enough, someone is always
Well, and they're,
behind her in front.
logistically,
Depends where you start.
their agenda would come out on Friday for their Tuesday meeting, so if we tried to meet the week before, we wouldn't yet have their agenda, is that right?
Yeah, and then again, I'm emphasizing, you're not expecting, this isn't about surprise topics. These are topics that you would have, they've probably been months in the development, and if they're surprise topics, this isn't what that's about. That's all.
Well, I think what's really valuable too is that if they get the message that the board has reviewed, the entire board, and then this consensus building, when they go to their meeting, the two reps, it's about us as a collective rather than do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, you're
The two
presenting a
reps.
consensus.
Yeah, I think it's so much better that way.
And for important issues, I think that's a good target.
Well, and then when you mentioned of changing the culture, I also think if we were more deliberative about how our representatives on CMSA were voting and thoughtful, and I guess I'm not talking within 1 month cycle, but months, then if we don't think that the sort of momentum of where the CMSA staff is taking the board, we have some opportunity to change that. Because right now, I don't feel like we do. With our 2 board members on the 7-member board or 6-member board.
6.
I almost feel like we could jump up and down and scream at a meeting, and then the vote would come out the same, which is not a very nice feeling. So that's another benefit of this process. If we're thinking about it in advance, possibly we could be, developing an argument months in advance that could change the direction of other board members.
The other thing I think is also, go ahead.
What day of the week?
Tuesday, second Tuesday of the month.
But the other thing, because I agree with Greg, I don't think it's the timing of the board meetings, because these big ticket items have been going on for months and maybe deserve more than just a quick mention at one of our board meetings, depending on the issue. I think it's a culture issue, because for a bunch of years, up until recently, we were very adversarial, whether we liked it or not, with that group. We were suing the heck out of them, and Santa Fe was not the beneficiary of that either, and Corte Madera was also having to pay for that lawsuit. And so for the first time in many, many, many years, I think, we can have, it's a work in progress, we can have these discussions, it's a brand new relationship that we haven't been able to have in many, many years. To be able to talk about things, to be able to discover things, like, excuse me, why are we sending our test samples to Contra Costa County when we can do them for free down the road? well, that was the previous general manager, and there's so many things happening here, it just never got changed. These kinds of things we can begin, now that we don't have an adversarial relationship, and we're all comrades sitting in the same boat, that we can begin to discuss, and I think this policy will be a work in progress. And, we're starting with this, and let's see where it goes, because I think we're gonna discover many, many things that we can do from this. So I think it's a great first start, and with any policy, it's not the Ten Commandments. Let's just come here and revisit it all the time.
Well, let me just comment on that. Obviously, I'm aware, just as a member of the public, of the, I'll just use a nice word, strange relationship between this board and the CMSA. And I'm thrilled that that's not happening anymore. Let's just say, it was in nobody's best interest, and it was not the right policy. And getting along is the right policy. It doesn't mean like anything, like on this board or any board, there isn't dissent or strong dissent, but it needs to be what it is now, which is a professional, collegiate, cooperative relationship where we're all working for the ratepayers and for the best interest of the public. And that's what's happening now. That's not what was happening, and that's why this board has really gone in the right direction. It really has.
So do we have any specific pointers on this, or is it?
Yeah, line 3, the appointed commissioners, it needs an S, and that's about all I need.
Thank you.
I'm still not positive that we should at some point consider timing changes, but I think we consider that.
All right.
We have a separate policy for how people are appointed for how long, right?
Correct.
Separate?
Yeah, this is, yeah.
The only thing that caught to mind, sorry, is that, how substitutes, what's the word I'm looking for? Alternates are designated. Because in my experience, it's been, you know, a personal decision by the designated commissioner. Do we want to have that be a full
Well,
board?
let me tell you a little story about that. Okay. So at one point when things were
A little bit louder, yeah.
in the past, when CMSA and our agency was in a pickle. So the person who's on the rep, sick or whatever, it got to be that they would pick who they wanted to pick.
Right.
And so there is, I thought, in the policy that they're supposed to pick the person that's the alternate, but that person did not. And it was a big brouhaha. So I'm just saying we need some rules around it.
I would, there should be a set policy that Tom has an alternate, for example, as me, and Mike has an alternate that's Pam. And if Mike can't go, then Pam goes, and if Tom can't go, then I go. That's the way,
That's
you know.
probably a good idea.
And you know, what we had on council for the police board, which I was loving that because I got to vote twice in a row, is we had one alternate. So one week John Wright couldn't go and I got to go, and the next week Tom McInerney couldn't go and I got to go. But we had one alternate. This board has two alternates. The other policy we could have, is we could go to one alternate, in which case if you don't go, I go, and if you don't go, I go. And that way you have one alternate who goes to all the meetings that the others can't, and is more up to date. So neither policy is right or wrong, but we should have one policy.
It doesn't have to be in here. It can be-
There's a learning curve though with that service, right?
That's what I'm saying.
What's going on there. So the alternate is an occasional attender, or maybe a tender all the time, but occasional
Voter.
necessity voter. And so one alternate, if one alternate would work, it's best to keep it at one. Only because then you only have one person to try to keep up to speed with what's going on in case they're present in service, rather than having two.
Well, what happened was, the alternate thing was because they wanted to make sure that alternate would vote the same way they voted. That's what it was about.
Well, but
That's resolved by having
until
people-
recently, you
I
haven't
know,
really.
but I'm
Yeah.
just saying, I don't know what our policy says.
Right.
So what's
So
best
that
practice
policy is
one?
resolved.
So the policy
I
right
think
now
one.
is that all of the people that are not the actual commissioners are alternates.
Yeah.
So
No?
Yes,
We had two
there are-
alternates.
No, there are three
Yeah,
alternates.
there are three
Um, But I think that this is one of the items that can be addressed in the next, in this next batch, because we have these description duties and appointment of board officers and filling board vacancies. So I think at that time, we can add that in there that we're gonna talk about.
I mean, primary alternate.
Sorry.
That we would have a primary.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, and so we'd all agree on sort of who gets the first call
Yeah.
if one of the board members. And
Well, and they know that they're supposed to stay up to speed on that, those particular
I think that makes sense. I mean, it's interesting because I know for example, Gary Phillips showed up at one CMSA meeting and he said Al Boro literally walked in to his office that afternoon and threw the board packet on him and said, "You're gonna go for me."
Well, as you pointed out earlier, there are some really significant decisions being made over there that have a huge effect on what happens here. The question is, how much of what happens here has an effect over there? That is just as much a question for you all as the other way around. So anyway, but that.
Thank you, Mary. So we'll deal with
That comes down to the how, not the you. Okay, good. Item number 4 is one that we knew would be just discussion because we didn't think we'd finish it today. So we wanted to start the discussion with Greg. Do you have any intro on item number 4 to different items?
Very brief, we tried to pretty much capture everything in the staff report. So the goal today is not to get to a draft policy. We have a policy. It is substantially out of date, as has been noted. And the main reason that this came to staff's attention was we were looking at basically comparisons across agencies for the board compensation, and we were also in the I think the last time we did the automatic update, because of the way the current ordinance is written, it's just every year there's a 5% automatic increase. What it said was, hold it, this has been on autopilot, we think. And the board has heard some of this before, just not on a formal agendized discussion, it was just very briefly noted. So what we're trying to do today is just give you the factual background on how the current status got to where it is, and then give you the opportunity today to at least start to put out what some of the big, key elements that you might use to frame a future compensation policy. So again, the basics are that we are required to have an ordinance to establish compensation, and Andrea can speak more to that, but we can confirm that. So you have an ordinance, and what has been in effect for almost 15 plus years now is essentially just a automatic update every year, 5%. And you can see from the list of similar agencies that we compiled with the current compensation rates, how they trend and where RVSD's current compensation rate is. And then lastly, we just proposed a couple of questions that are just intended to help kick off today's discussion on this in terms of how the board sees the compensation topic. It's not a simple one, and there are details and things to take into account. For example, other districts have, they may have different mix of benefits. Every once in a while you have agencies that provide health care, for example, and that of course has substantial monetary value and so forth. So like any discussion about compensation, it shouldn't be looked at through just one lens or consideration. And today, again, is just the opening. We're just looking for feedback, and the goal is to leave here today with next steps on crafting a compensation policy for you guys. So that's it from staff. And
I am very surprised that this was passed so long ago,
Yeah.
and with an automatic 5% per year increase. That seems to me, basically unjustifiable. I know we are technically employees now in the district because of the way the law requires, and so at the very most, I would hope it would be like a cost of living, but that doesn't even seem appropriate. And I would like to be more in line with
Well,
others.
why would cost of living not be appropriate?
Because because these are not payments that are truly contributing to our ability to live in Marin. I mean, it's more, in my mind, it's more of an honorarium. It's, not like a salary, even though technically we are some small percentage of a full-time employee, I guess. Go ahead.
Well, knowing the Marin Water, they get, I know we're not water, but I think they get insurance, health insurance from Canada.
I honestly don't know.
They do.
They get
I noticed that on
huge
their
compensation, so I don't really, yeah.
I'm sorry, I remember on the board, you said they may, I don't know that it said they did, yeah, it was.
Yeah, no, I'm
I was-
talking to Larry Bradley about that. And that,
Isn't there a statutory limit on this?
There are, but I think you're within them, you know, I think you're handling the compensation within law, and Andrea can speak up to this more, but maybe, I think that's what we're all bringing up, is that may not be the point here. The point is, go ahead.
I thought there was
Go
a
ahead.
dollar
Yeah,
limit.
there is a dollar limit, it's $100 per meeting is what the statutory limit, but because if you want to go over that amount, that's why you have to have the ordinance.
Oh, okay.
so
Yeah, but the limit that's.
I guess I'd like to see some, because Marin County is the highest income, cost of living in the Bay Area, and knowing what I see around me and people moving because they can't afford to be here anymore, I mean, I don't really care if it goes up or down, but I'd like to see how we compare to East Bay Mud, maybe a couple down the peninsula or San Francisco. And I kind of put in a little bit of the cost of living, but you're right, it's an honorary thing. But still, I don't know, if I look at the water district, it's the compensation's so much bigger. And at one point, if I remember looking back on some board members who are no longer here, there's patterns of some board members had exorbitant amounts, and I kept going, how do they do that? Or they're on so many committees that the committees aren't divided up fairly, there's all these little things. So, anyway, I'm not taking one side or another right now.
I make one point as somebody who's run for office more than once. It's somewhat of an honorarium, however, you do kind of negate the opportunity for people who aren't rich retired lawyers to run. One of the things about the honorarium is it kind of pays you back your campaign costs. Now, this campaign cost this time, mine was pretty well in line. But my one in November, it was a lot of money. And you hope if you get elected, you get that money back. And so I don't see there's anything wrong with that. And not to mention the fact, being a board member of a $40 million a year corporation is not without some risk. And in recent times, we've had board members here being threatened to be sued personally. So, I'm not opposed to an honorarium. I'm opposed to health care and benefits and retirement and that kind of thing. But,
And I think what's being pointed out here, however, as well, is that if the IJ were to do an expose, this is the kind of analysis they do. And you all would kind of, not only do they get the most of any of those that they could choose, remember, it's our own choosing.
Right.
But they also have a 5% automatic.
yeah, that I'm not a big fan of.
And so this is kind of the issues, plus what kind of message does it send to staff in terms of, wow, they get themselves 5% every year, why don't, and so there's that issue as well, the question,
And
those precedents.
yeah, it harkens back to
You
the
know,
Brett Richards automatic increase,
Yeah.
5% increases. And actually Dan Miller at the elections office once said to me, and I don't remember why, there's some form we have to fill out, and he said, well, just because you guys get paid so much.
You let that slide, say, what? And then it went right by you.
See, I had no idea what the board salaries were for the other districts. I think I asked Mary once or twice about this. Personally, I wouldn't mind rolling it back and not eliminating, I like an index factor. Something nominal, you use maybe a cost of living, the same as we give our employees, or Greg, but I would even be in favor of rolling it back. And also for committees, I think committees should get not more than half. I think half of a day, you know, whatever. I mean, that's my
So we're,
impression.
pardon me, we're
Wait a minute,
looking at
half a day, what do you mean, or half?
No, no, it's half of what a board, a regular board.
You know, I spent 4 hours going to North Bay Watershed. I could have worked at the hospital for 4 hours. So, you know, it depends on your income and all that. I don't feel like that we're overdoing it. I don't. I mean, I could possibly roll it back some and look at other agencies, but I'd like to look at the East Bay and San Francisco. But, you know, I think for me, to be on the same page, my work is my work here. I spend 2 to 4 hours sometimes reviewing a packet, depending on the size. I come to a meeting, that's 4 hours. That's 8 hours. I don't know where people are at financially in their life, but I have to be really cautious on, you know, how much I make, and I don't have a high income. So, anyway, I'm sorry, I'm a little up there.
So, Tom, let me just go back to Tom's, you said roll it back, you mean the index piece, not roll the amount back, you're
I
saying.
roll the amount back to some.
Roll, and you also
Something
entertain rolling the amount back.
Yeah, and then indexing it too.
In the end, okay, so that's just one
That's
thought
one-
that can go into the next generation of this, which is what we'll see, it'll go down to that next pile to be reviewed in the future, but I've got other comps may be useful. Make sure we reference state statute, and have very good clarity on the process and so forth. Eliminate the index, roll back the daily amount. We've got to define that day issue,
Yeah.
per day. What does that mean? And I think the
Per
discussion
meeting.
just started that, and that was good discussion on help us all understand what a day means.
Well, just to
I mean, one
clarify, 'cause-
committee, it could be an hour.
yeah, the group has actually, in the past, you did address that particular
It's in policy now.
topic, yeah. So the current, and it certainly can be changed, but the current definition is, this is a per
Day,
day
no matter how many
amount,
hours.
and whether you have 1 meeting or 2 meetings, or it's a 3-hour or a 6-hour meeting, it's the same dollar amount. So that part, I mean, again, on the face, it's clear at the moment that that's how it's being applied.
Right, and you're looking at it as well, no matter how many meetings they have in a day, it's still a day. I'm looking at it as one meeting a day, and so it's kind of two ways of looking at it, so
Yeah.
both need to be clarified.
Yeah, and that was one of the concerns expressed in the past discussion was, well, does it make sense if we, because there was some interpretation that it's per meeting, and it was, wow, gosh, you know, sometimes you might come in and have a fairly short meeting, and you're out of here in 45 minutes or an hour, meaning that would be more typically for a committee. And is that reasonable? So we knew it could go both ways. On the other hand, sometimes you come in and it's, you know, it's 4 hours, 3 hours.
3-hour
Yeah,
meeting.
so that's where it currently stands, it's per day, no matter how many hours are involved. And that way, if, for example, you go to CASA and you attend some official business there, you know, you get a one-time, it's just that amount. Then you go to North Bay Watershed, if you're representing the district, whether that meeting is 1 hour or 3 hours, you know, that's.
Well, there's travel time too,
Yeah.
and all that. And if you go on these classes, I have to use vacation time for my job. I mean, there's all this stuff that seems to be really, I don't know if we've talked about it at length. I don't mind rolling it back, or maybe you should do every other year, or maybe you should just do like I don't know, 3%. I don't even know what the cost of living increase is. But there's all these things that probably should be aired.
Many times the best governance practice is to have it to where the board has to openly deal with it every year or two, however. But the value of putting it on the agenda and dealing with it is everybody says, we hate that because we know what it's going to mean. On the other hand, this is easy. On the other hand, it's public, it's out there, everyone can see what you're doing. If you're going to give yourself a raise, if you're going to roll it back, whatever you're going to do, you're going to do it in front of everybody on a periodic.
And I don't think it needs to be every year. I think you can have a policy where this is the compensation until such time as it's not.
Yeah, you do that too.
And then that's it.
A lot of agencies.
Right.
And most do, I think.
You know, having it 15 years ago put on 5% by by Buckle, Bjorn, and Fanny. I mean, I remember those people. I don't remember Mariani. This was a long
She's
time
the
ago.
president of the Water Sanitary District.
Oh, she is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Olivo was absent.
The differential.
So,
What do you think about the differential for CMSA? I mean, should CMSA be over and above, or should there be some sort of, okay, if you're on CMSA, then there's some difference? Is there any more background?
What is the differential?
oh, well, so CMSA pays $100 and RVSD has been making up the difference between that and ours. But my gut reaction is CMSA's meetings are so much shorter than ours, and having just argued that I didn't think that was a good thing.
So that was one of the reasons that we thought that the 2 CMSA members should meet, and have an additional meeting each one, not get paid for it.
Right,
But as part of the CMSA filling
package.
out the board, you attend the CMSA meeting, which is 45 minutes.
You get $100
But
for
then-
that.
If you're doing it right, the CMSA board meeting should go a lot longer now.
It's
But
You
we
got two
also-
conflicting policies, one, we're gonna make those dates a lot longer, and two, we're not paying anybody for them.
More deliberative.
Well, that was the plan, to include that
Yeah.
pre-meeting as part of the
So,
Which is more operational
Compensation.
and method, more of a method,
Well-
but it justifies, is what you're saying, the differential.
Yeah.
Or the.
But
Well, yeah, we get it anyway, so.
what if we didn't have the differential? Because I've heard prior to being elected to this board, I heard people say, oh, and you know what, those RVSD members, they get the $100 from CMSA, and then RVSD pays them all the way up to their high.
Double dipping.
In effect, I mean, it does make it seem as though, our,
shouldn't it be 50%?
of what?
They pay 50%, we pay the other.
They're only gonna be 100.
They're only I think everybody else sitting at that table is only getting 100.
So the idea is, but
That's an old.
I think
we should-
day,
It's weird that what we're doing here today is this is informational, and we're not deciding, so
Right.
why don't we just have a deciding
just
meeting?
looking for when
Yeah.
we can kind of let it.
I just open them all up.
And then
Everybody should be able to-
as I think about it, since we pay half of everything that, CMSA pays, it's, anyway,
That's the old
Half of what
policy,
you
that
pay.
$100.
So we-
It's really old. Yeah.
half of what
so
they get
so
from
RVSD
you.
is paying each of our commissioners $50 to be at that meeting, plus then the differential that brings us up, anyway.
So we're paying twice.
But members that are assigned there get another check from CMSA.
They get a $100 check.
Yeah, you get that.
Yeah.
But then you also get the 314.
No,
The difference to me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, so you changed it?
No,
Because in the past, we made up the difference.
that's what we
That's what I'm saying.
Just make-
But
Minus.
150 wouldn't make
I
it.
didn't get that far, but.
Yeah.
The numbers are off a little bit, but we're saying.
So you get 214. Yeah, for the day's service.
My
Like
hope,
you would be.
my hope had been with this new idea of a committee meeting, that we would meet on the same day, or consider it the same day, whatever we want to call it, as the CMSA meeting. So, but you only get reimbursed for
One meeting a day.
a day.
You don't get
And so
further compensation.
it's,
But it would be more justifiable, is really what you're saying. The amount.
it's,
Yeah, that makes sense.
but that's, that.
4 hours.
To me, Mary made a comment that it is kind of double dipping, but I'd also put it the other way, on behalf of the guys who are representing CMSA. Half their income comes from us, we're more important than they are.
Is it half of your income goes to them, or half of their income comes from you?
The latter. We fund half of their service, we're,
Both are,
Yeah.
wait,
Okay, that.
both statements are true.
Both are true, wow.
It's half our budget,
oh,
or
yeah.
half their budget.
Yeah, that's true.
But only, I shouldn't.
It just happens to be true.
Percentage of votes.
Those two things are,
So I-
are logically
I think,
connected.
what we're saying is everything should come up, we should talk about all this. Who knows where we'll go?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
It's not the money. I mean, we're a $35 million organization here, and, they're even more, it's the public perception
It's a
of what's going on.
Yeah.
And maybe if you're running over to a 45-minute meeting, and and having multiple agencies pay, and the IJ and Dick Spotswood writes a big thing about that. Yeah, but on the other hand, if you've got a committee meeting that's happening beforehand, where you're really spending a lot of time discovering,
Yep.
spending,
And you're reading the documents.
and, you know, I just, in my short time on that, I've discovered a few things happening over there that have already, I think, paid this agency back, you know, some of that by having that relationship. So, money aside, I would be able to justify anything that we're not just going over and saying, let's spend 15 minutes, Yahoo check. You know.
If I can help you out on that a little bit,
Sure.
and maybe you know this too, as being mayor of Tracy. When I was on town council, I don't want to list them all, but town council, fire board, back up to police board, ABAG,
Mira.
Mira as well, yep, and then there was also California League of Cities, and also as California League of Cities, I was on a board for them. The compensation was about 12 cents an hour. So I think some of it's the wrong way, and if Dick Spotswood called me up, I'd say just that. I'd say, you know, so it's not, and you're talking about a $40 million budget, it's not a lot of money. I think what we need to do is talk about it and be honest with it and put it on the agenda and not shy away from it. And I'm going to be blunt that what I said I meant is, if you make the compensation so low, you're going to have people who can't run. And the other thing is, and again, this is what I was thinking when I was on the town council, if I win, I'll get my campaign money back. So it really was zero for me. In fact, just as a record, for me on San Antonio Town Council, that was a big negative. I put way more into my campaigns than I ever got paid back. And not all of us are rich retired lawyers. So, you know, I'm not opposed to the compensation in general. The automatic 5% increase,
Right.
that sticks
Let's
in my
have a
craw.
public deliberation about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Is that enough?
Do we
I
have?
think we got enough to work with, yeah. So this will be one that will be coming back with an outline.
So under the drafting routine items under Exhibit A, that listing of 3 different bins of policies, that one will drop now down to that. And there'll be, I'll just read them real quick. Description, duties, and appointments of board officers, this is in the future. Filling board vacancies, board committees, rules of order, board members and legal counsel, board members and harassment rules, clerk of the board, recording of minutes, and compensation. So all those are still to come with what we've done today. And you'll see these back, the ones we did deal with today, in a form where you can have your last tweaks, and then up to and including approval.
All right, thank you. And that was actually item number 4, wasn't it? Yes, it was.
It was, yeah.
I don't think Andrea, we don't still have you, do we?
Yeah, I'm here
Oh, okay. You need to go at,
at 2 o'clock.
Oh, great, okay.
Trying to do
So can we close now?
got it, okay. All right, thank you. We'll now close the open session and go to closed session. Thank you. John, is your public?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I got it.
We need to get,
Okay, well, you're back recording.
Okay, so we don't need that one also? All right.
Well, actually, no, I don't think this would be, because I'm not sure how they do all this stuff, so it's.
Can you turn that on?
Someday we should teach everybody how to do it.
No.
But until
Well,
then,
I
they're
really
like,
a wireless one.
Policy.
This one's like.
Okay, all right, we're back in open session. And our report out is that the board.
Wait, 1 second. Let me just do this. Okay, now it's recording. So all that was recorded? Okay.
It should be.
Okay, take
It's recording.
2. We're back in open session, and our report out is that the board voted 4 to 0 to 1, I would say. 4 in favor, 0 no's, and 1 abstention. Director Meggs abstained to approve the settlement agreement with Brett Richards. The agreement settles the outstanding litigation related to Mr. Richards' prior employment with the district.
Did you say 4 no's?
I said 4 yes, 0 no's, 1 abstention.
Can you say approve the settlement agreement, and then what was that second part? You said-
Let me read it again. With Brett Richards, the agreement settles the outstanding litigation related to Mr. Richards' prior employment with the district. As advised by counsel to report out. That I just added.
Okay.
Thank you all, and this meeting of Ross Valley Sanitary District is adjourned.
Thanks, you guys. Have a great night.